Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, and welcome back to Fanalysis Star Wars. I'm Callum, this is Matt,
Hey everybody, welcome.
and this is Evan.
Greetings.
Carrying on with our continued chapter reviews, or chapter analyses, of the Plagueis book. Who's taking us off with this one to start with?
I'll do it. So we're looking at chapters 9, 10, and 11 today. These are the chapters in which Plagueis meets Palpatine and sort of conscripts him as his new ally. And he sort of, I don't know if you'd say he falls to the dark side of the Force.
It was kind of
He was,
born
like,
into it.
born ready to- yeah.
Molded by
Yeah,
it.
his proclivities are kind of already leaning that way, but I guess you could say it's, well, maybe not fall, but seduced, which there is
Sure,
actually a
that's
chapter.
also the chapter
There's a
title.
chapter that
Yeah.
will, eventually. So that's kind of what you would call it.
Yeah, I really like, speaking of chapter titles, I like chapter 9's a lot, Untapped Reserves, because what it really is a dual reference, because obviously Palpatine is the, like, becomes the real point of everything on Naboo is when Plagueis realizes he has the makings of a perfect apprentice, or what could be in his mind. But he doesn't know to be looking for that to start off with, so he's just looking for how to how to go about mining the plasma that he's learned about on Naboo through his shady connections to the people that attended his gathering, and tried to assassinate him and his master for somewhat unclear reasons. But it's implied to be part of like this long-standing grudge match between him and the Santhi family. But anyway, so that's like carrying on from the business of Ten versus death and everything like that, just to catch up people because it's been months since we looked at these. But anyhow, yeah. So he thinks he's looking for plasma, finds a potential apprentice. That's more or less like what's going on here. It's also a little bit of a belts and roads initiative, kind of,
Yes, yeah.
with
Mhm.
trying to figure out how we can get these advanced but not too advanced, not as advanced as we are, people up and running and part of like the
Mhm.
larger, economic galactic community,
Be a cog in
and
our
with the
machine.
resources. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot
Um,
of world building for just the Naboo people and just their
yes.
histories, their relations, with the Gungans. How the royal, families kind of position themselves and what it ultimately comes to. Because their monarchy system, though it is an elected, body, and how that sort of feeds into the general culture of the planet and their willingness and in some cases an unwillingness in others to open themselves up to the wider galactic community and the ramifications thereof.
Yes. Um, I want so it starts. The chapter starts off on Munilist itself and like the board meeting of like Damask Holdings, which I really like the way that that room is described. It's kind
Mm.
of like a long description, so I don't want to read the entire thing. But it's just really cool. They're like on the 200th floor of a building that has been like built
Mhm.
to encase like a natural hot spring, kind of, and it's become like a spa. It just sounds like super over the top, and you kind of want to see what that would have looked like, but kind of in a classy way, like over
Mm.
the top but
Right.
classy.
Yeah.
So you want to, I really want to
Luxurious,
see
not
what,
garish.
yeah, yeah. I would
Yeah,
love
you
to
get
see that
sort
map painting of everything, like in a film somewhere, like if it
it
had the Andor style budget, kind of a thing.
Mm.
oh, yeah. It kinda puts in mind of, like, a bunch of, like, suits and, like, maybe, like, a Hawaiian resort or something going in a boardroom overlooking, like, an ocean or something along those lines, that same kind
Yeah,
of energy.
And at the same time,
it's fun
it
because they don't
maintains that
seem to
kind of
enjoy it.
visual vibe of them all just being hooded and in shadow and like that Shadow Broker
Yeah,
style
Yeah.
feeling. It's not actually describing that, but it's just you get the sense of that presence just from the fact that Plagueis is sitting back and kind of observing it
Mhm.
all um,
Yeah.
as
yeah,
he does.
Yeah, well yeah, something I've also really appreciated about this book, just in the general design elements, is how they carried over Munilist as it's just as we see it in the micro series. The 2000, 3 micro series, and how that same sort of architecture is described in this book as well. I always really enjoyed that consistency, but at the same time, they add to it in the sense of more than what we see in those little episodes back in the day as well, which is always nice.
yeah, for sure. So this begins with like kind of a extensive, what do they call it? Like a holo call or like a whatever, like when the hologram shows up instead of a telephone call.
Mm.
Zoom
And
meeting.
it's,
The
yeah, oh
Zoom
yeah, a
meeting of
Zoom
Star
meeting. There
Wars,
you
yeah.
go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's Varuna, who was a character who had a name in something but like long before this was, but he's not the king yet. But it was established that he was king of Naboo before Padme, or Amidala, whatever, became queen. Um, and it was never really explained you knew just from watching the films that she had been elected queen, but they never
Mm.
explained how or why that worked or why it wasn't a hereditary position or anything like that. I don't know if that was established in the novelization of the Phantom Menace because I haven't looked at that in forever. At some point, we'll probably look at that for this channel, but I haven't been through that since the 90s, I guess. Like,
Mm.
I got like 1999 whenever it came out, so that I have no memory of whatsoever. But anyhow, I don't know when they established the reason for, like, Naboo's government being the way that it is, but nobody is better suited to making a whole meal of that than James Luceno. So that's pretty much like a full third of this book is all about, like, the rise of Naboo as we know it. So it's really, I, I hesitate to say cool, like, because it's not like a
I know what you
universal
mean, though.
cool.
It's like you said before the recording started. I think you've mentioned it in a previous chapter review as well. But he does boring very well. Like in terms of just making
Yeah.
it interesting and engaging, and turning the cogs and pulling the levers where he needs to make sure that particularly in the way that Plagueis is as a character, is he's thinking about these things. It's making it the kind of machination of it integral to the kind of sub-level plot. It's not necessarily the story of the book going through it, but it always feels like it's well integrated. It feels like the appropriate amount of time is being spent on every single feature, etc. And it ties into the characters because obviously the whole idea and the kind of landscape of this is this, like you said, the elevation of Naboo and the setup and build up to what we know will come in the Phantom Menace. But in terms of the story, it's actually about Palpatine. So it's doing it all in that neat, well-woven
And I
wrapper.
think, and it blew
Yeah.
my mind. I might have mentioned this in one of the previous recordings, but I don't remember. It really blew my mind when this book started to align with the Phantom Menace's spot in the timeline, when it became like, okay, this is going on concurrently to, like, what Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are doing, and Plagueis is still alive. Like, really? Okay. I just didn't see that coming the first time I read the book, but, like, just seeing that, like, Varuna's here, and eventually he becomes king, and these people are doing stuff. It should have been clearer from the outset that that was a possibility, that this was going to become like a real, kind of like a much more interesting version of what is going on in the Phantom Menace. And at the same time, it can kind of only be this cool because the Phantom Menace was the Phantom Menace. So it's like this weird thing. This is why I've always been a little, I'm less harsh on the Phantom Menace than I would otherwise be, because it opened up this world. I feel like kind of almost by accident,
Yeah.
that so many people did wonderful
Yeah.
things with. But yeah, I love all this stuff. I love,
Well,
speaking of boring, can we just talk about, like, a little bit of the jargon, like how the conversation starts? It's sort of like, it kind of reminds me of, like, the Phantom Menace, like when, what was that guy's name? It's one of the
oh,
worst Star Wars name, the bearded guy, Beardy. When
yeah.
he's talking about, is it Bibble? Is his name like something
Oh,
Bibble?
Sio Bibble. Yeah. I
That's it.
remember now.
Sio Bibble. Terrible. Like, and people wonder why we can't remember, like, Star Wars names, and, like, Andor. Star Wars names have always been crap. Like they're just terrible. Like, you get cool stuff like Darth Vader, and then you got Sio
Mhm.
Bibble over here. Like, I mean, it's really,
To be fair, there are a lot of characters in a lot of books. They're going to run out of names.
Yeah. You
Sio
must
Bibble.
contact me.
I mean,
I was
that
gonna.
is not a name for a film character, by the way.
Yeah. No.
Shmi Skywalker, by the way. Like, of all her name is
Oh
Shmi.
yeah.
But and anyway, this whole thing, it's like, he chimes in, and it describes him and, like, what he looks like and what his overall, position is. He's not actually in government yet, but it explains, like, the side he's aligned with and what their goals are and everything. Like, with a really pretty, thorough character introduction and everything for a character who's
Mhm.
not, who doesn't really have that much to do other than become, like, a sort of obstacle that needs to be removed later. But yeah, it just starts off in the middle of the conversation, and I like the use of jargon and just getting to the, root of, dirty politics and everything, and let's get the ball rolling. It says, our campaign has been stalled by recent allegations from the leaders of some of the royal houses, Veruna was telling the gathered Munes. Something has to be done to recapture momentum, and quickly. Counter-allegations made public by an unknown benefactor went a long way towards undoing the initial damage of the nobles' media releases, but a new wariness has gripped the electorate, strengthening the position of our provincial opponents. It's like boring, 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 but it's immaculately well done boring. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's like perfectly done boring, and it's like an in and out kind of boring. That's actually a short,
Right.
like like passage if you're looking at it, and it really, it's a lot of what the Phantom Menace is, but like skating past, like a more condensed
It's
version
not.
of
It's
it,
the
and
camera's
You know,
not lingering
yeah,
on that. It's okay. Like
yeah,
in and out is the perfect way to describe it. There, he's threading the
mhm,
needle. He's okay. This is the subject matter. This is the discussion point, and we're going into the meat of it. We're going into the emotion. We're going into the
it's
character drives. We're
yeah,
going into the politics. We're going into what each side wants and how they're going to get it. It never lingers on that long shot of the trade negotiation speech.
right. It's clipped just enough to give you an idea of like what the stakes are without wading into the weeds too much to where you're thinking, okay, can we just move on and get to the point?
Mm.
And
yeah,
not
and
easy to do
then
with any sort of political speech, as we've stated in many previous chapter reviews.
Well, particularly in the veins of the fact that these are bankers. These are bankers.
yes,
This
Yes,
is not like high
that too.
politics in the
Yeah,
typical
and
sense that you
it's
can make work with things like Game of Thrones or
mhm,
whatever. This is just people
yeah,
discussing how to make profit off of
yeah.
a
yeah,
machination.
Themselves are bored by this, and so they cut off the feed. They say audio cancellation, and they do that so that they can talk shit. And I
Mm.
like that it says secure in the knowledge that the conversation around the table had been muted, so they wait, just to make sure he can't hear what I'm gonna say, like right. And then it goes,
hmm
"Are all the Naboo as hirsute and elaborately costumed as this Varuna?" So it's like he's saying, "Are they all hairy and look like clowns? Like what is this? Like why is this? Like what's going on here?" And this is where people will recall I had an issue with orbiculate flora on Selukami or Selukamai or like however you say that. This word, this word here, this is the king of Lucino like words for me. Larsh Hill replied, "They are traditionalists, tonsorially as well as politically. I defy you to know what tonsorially means, like you in the comments, without looking it up. For those who don't know, it means of or related to barbering from some sort of Latin root. Tonsorially, I almost blame this word for existing. Like why is this? You know what I mean? It's on him for reaching for it because he didn't
Yeah.
need to use
hmm
it. But
Put the
why does the
thesaurus
word
down, as we always say.
exist? Why is there an adverb for Barbary? Like I've done
This
this in a
one went
barber
way over my
way,
head. I
right.
don't mind saying. I had no idea what that meant when I first heard it, and had to look
Yeah,
it up.
tonsorially.
Yeah.
Like
Ditto.
The others
it's
I
I've never
got
seen
through
it in
context
my
or had
life.
encountered before, but this one was
Yeah,
like whoop.
I
Yeah,
mean,
and it's like
it's
I
just
feel like this word more than anything else in this entire book. And there's a lot of words and that are of this quality in this book, but this word feels like he got to break the glass. Look, I can finally do it. I can finally. He's been waiting. He's been waiting to use this
yes,
word.
my time to
Like
shine.
yeah, we got a live one. Like alarms are flaring. It's like just
Exactly.
like I mean, I don't know. It's like it's crazy. Tonsorially. But he
But at the
goes on
same
to
time,
say,
if any character was going to use it, it would be immune. In this context. So it's
Exactly.
funny how this is the book where he really gets to kind of let loose on that front.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, it's
now
like
I'm just imagining that sequence in Revenge of the Sith where Palpatine is like calling Commander Cody and he's like, "The time has come."
Oh God, yeah. If he went into a verbose.
it's basically what it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
The Billy Connolly, one of my favorite comedians, he did a bit. I can't remember what he was talking about, just like a throwaway joke where he was like pretending like, fetch my writing trousers. I feel a song coming on. It's like I feel like something like that's always in my
Yeah,
head when I think of like he finally gets to
yeah.
use this word that he wants to.
But yeah,
I get to
but
force the word honey. I got to use the word today. It's like really like tonsorially, scratch it off the bucket list.
That's what it could be. It's a
It's
competition with his
incredible.
spouse, and then they've got okay.
yeah,
Can you use this word in your day? And it's like, oh God,
there you
she's
go.
killing me with this.
There you
Yeah,
go.
but
Word of the day.
but you following up to what you were saying, Matt. What I will say is this, and this is something else this book does, like at several points, highlighting the contrast between the Naboo sort of design and the Naboo sort of culture with those of the not just the Munes, but various other cultures throughout the galaxy as they're gradually introduced. I do like that Lucino uses that as not just a distinction of difference, but also a way of sort of teeing up how, okay, in order to get these deals done, the Plagueis and the rest of the Munes have to kind of conduct business in a certain sort of, I guess I wouldn't say like different from what they usually do, but also in a unique way in order to really kind of get the ball rolling. So it presents its own unique sort of challenge, despite this being a very similar kind of deal to what they have done in the past. And it's
Yeah.
actually good justification for why Plagueis is, so committed to this. Because obviously, he does meet Palpatine later on, but I like how this sort of tees up like, no, this is why he is putting so much of his energy into this, why he actually cares about the Naboo deal going through even before he realizes Palpatine's connection to the Force, because he initially doesn't, perceive him that in that way, which we'll get to
Right.
shortly. But I like that cultural difference is one of the major highlights, in addition to the plasma, to why that there's so much emphasis put on this, because you do need to justify why he should care in the way that he does at this point, disregarding all the things with the miners and all that. So again, I really do appreciate that. It just comes down to the little things that he didn't have to do, but is appreciated in order to kind of, keep the pace going. So just want to
Well,
follow up on
just
that.
just to read some of the text out of that, because I like how he jumps from one point to another, right? So there's the whole
Mhm.
tonsorially thing, and then they go on to explain that this tradition hails from some obscure figure called Queen Elsinore Dentasia of Grismalt, who is the first like human leader from wherever, who
Yeah.
established like a colony, what must have been like a
Yeah,
colonial
which
expedition,
big
to
world building
Naboo.
bit, by the way. A lot of the Naboo, that
Yeah,
means the Naboo aren't native to the
they're not
planet,
from
and
there. Yeah,
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 which, you
and
know
yeah, they also go on to say that they're not sure whether the Gungans are either.
Mm.
He says
Mhm.
in addition, the Naboo supports a hairless amphibious species known as the Gungans, perhaps indigenous, perhaps not, but in no position to represent the planet in galactic dealings in either case. Which is nice. This is why Lars Hill is like one of my favorite little side characters. He's like efficient. He's like done all the homework
Mm.
and he knows like
Yeah,
what's going on here. He doesn't just know this. He's had time
right,
to research the planet while Plagueis was off taking care of Venus's other prospective apprentices, which is nice.
He's done the
So
research.
right,
he's done all that, and so you're getting all this kind of from the outset. We're not taking a side in this because they're humans or because they're the Gungans. We just want the plasma. We couldn't care less about like the squabbling years of rivalry that the two have, but we got to know what we're walking into. Like to your point earlier, they have to
right,
research every situation and figure out, okay, how do we
which
approach them
yeah,
and what are their needs and what are their weaknesses and everything. But
mhm,
it's also it is true that they don't necessarily need this planet. It's just that's another reason why it's nice, because Plagueis he's not even that interested himself in this, to be honest. Like right at the start, he's still on a high about like his Sith adventure, like the fact he's
right,
a new Dark Lord and he got rid of Venemus's apprentices candidates, and so he's just kind of like his mind is a little bit elsewhere. Um, and it says to him, or it says here, like what he's thinking about while all this back and forth is going on. It says the missions to Liana, Selukami, and Abraxan were still fresh in his thoughts. On a philosophical level, he understood why the generations of Sith lords that had preceded him had trained apprentices to whom they had bequeathed their knowledge of the dark side of the Force in anticipation of an eventual challenge for superiority. So he's kind of saying like this head rush is like addictive, and like that's part of the point in itself of the whole Sith,
mhm,
tradition, is like just feeling like on this high is one of the reasons why in itself you would go about doing things the Sith way. But this is like classic. I won't say Plagueis. It must be the pattern that most of them fall into. You just believe you're at the end of the line because why wouldn't you be? You're you.
Mm.
You're the best. And it says, but with the grand plan culminating. No, like how does he know it's culminating? He like the
right,
signs are there, they seem to be, but surely every Sith
because
must
he
have
says
felt that
so,
way.
and
Mm.
therefore it
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
But at the
So it
same
says,
time,
but
it has enough legitimacy to the situation he's currently in, where that is true.
sure.
mhm,
it's both in the same time, which is
But
interesting for
all
his
of
and
them must
character.
have thought that to a degree. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Yeah.
and
So it's like,
yeah.
yeah. But it
And in
says, but with the
hindsight
grand
and in
plan,
hindsight, it is this deal that kinda helps really get that
yes,
ball
that
rolling
big
in
domino.
particular as
Yeah,
yes,
well.
exactly.
Yeah,
it's like the Force is playing a
Um,
joke on him as he's thinking this.
exactly. That's part of the
very
theme of the
possible.
whole book. Yeah.
Mm.
So it's like, but with the grand plan culminating, it made no sense to challenge or kill beings of equal power unless they posed a threat to Plagueis' personal destiny. The Sith line would continue through him, or not at all. Thus the need for a partner rather than an underling, a cohort to help put into play the final stages of the imperative. It had long been his belief that the dark side would provide that one when the time was right. So to your point, that's the mindset he's going into it with. So he's
Mhm.
already looking for that.
Mm.
So it's him seeing what he wants to see. And at the same time, as you said, there's all the reasons to believe it. There's also plenty of reasons to maybe show a
Mhm.
little humility and
Hit the
doubt and
Yeah.
brakes.
question whether or not you see what you're
Yeah.
saying.
This is
Um,
also, like, where we also get, like, more seeds of, like, his ultimate, or what is at least intended to be his ultimate hypocrisy in the end about like treating his apprentice
Yes.
as equal. Whether or not that really comes through, like obviously we'll get to more when we get to the final acts of the book, but all
Yeah.
of those teeing up is also a major point, and he uses that as kind of something I wanted also just to follow up on what you were saying about just the Sith Lion too. I do find it interesting that when he's on this high of like being the Sith Master and wanting to progress, it's also a good way of showing how even the most self-absorbed Sith lords, will still kind of go out of their way to like train an apprentice or at least have underlings, because that same high of being the master is also demonstrated in their ability to pass on their knowledge, but also keeping some in reserve for themselves to maintain their position. Again, you could read a lot into that and come to a lot of interesting conclusions. I'm not saying it applies to Plagueis as directly as a lot of others, but it is an interesting little way of showcasing that legacy, because the relationship between Sith Master and apprentice is obviously dictated depending on like the era and the timeline and how the Rule
Yes.
of Two in
Yes.
particular really treats it. But I
Sure.
like that continuity. It's sorry, just didn't
Sure.
mean to go on a little rant there. I just
No,
wanted
it's
to.
fine. It's perfect because it also, like, to what you were speaking towards a little bit earlier in this conversation. The next passage also talks about why is he interested in this so suddenly? Because he doesn't actually need to be. It's just that he sees more and more cause to invest in it. And it's partially for that reason that becomes like his abiding interest in it, like once Palpatine gets involved. But to start off with, he's he's almost a little bit more interested than he otherwise would be because of the amount of problems or perspective problems that there are popping up. Those are the sort of weeds that are threatening his garden right now if he doesn't start doing something. So he's going. It says, Plagueis hadn't anticipated having to turn his attention quite so suddenly to Naboo, but with the Trade Federation still grumbling about his support for the Outer Rim free trade zones, and the Gran worried about losing pod race revenues to Gardula the Hutt, all of this being his fault, there were ample reasons for getting down to business. More important, Plagueis had long sought a planet that Damask Holdings and the steerage committee members could use as a base of operations. Because if you don't know, Munilists is in buttfuck nowhere. It's way out there. Like, just look at it.
Mhm.
Look at a map. It is nowhere near the core. It's about as far from the core as you can get while still being part of the galaxy. But anyway, so and the possibility of having a future king at their beck and call was an added bonus, and even such unlikely players as Boss Cabra stood to profit from the Mune's securing of Naboo. So again, these are all references that should have keyed me into the fact that eventually this is going to get into like Phantom Menace, like spot in the times in the time slot. We don't really deal with Boss Cabra too much, but his company is important. His son is one of the Black Sun Vigos that's in the Darth Maul comic, for example, the character you've already met if you've read this far into the book.
Arnada, yeah.
Darnada, yeah. And you actually do see Boss Cabra at some point. He takes part in some shady, just talks and everything. But it's nice because this is part of the all of these names are used to like make the boring stuff come across as more what's the word, verisimilitude, right? All these names
Mm.
of companies that all have a different specialty are being like used to like
Mhm.
for the plan of like the proposed plan of how to transform Naboo into a mining and shipping hub for plasma. And very little of it involves on world or native companies or
Mhm.
resources. So that's one of the reasons
And
why it's a controversial plan to start off with. And they sort of they talk about a little bit. I guess we'll get into the language there, of the actual deal making. But I really like Plagueis is quiet throughout most of this. He doesn't talk very often. He spends most of it listening. I think the first time he speaks is because he wants to know about the allegations that were made by the other royal houses. And he starts off with just that question. Veruna explains what that was about, and it's sort of like there's clearly an element of truth to it because we know how cutthroat and unscrupulous and frankly amoral the Munes are, but the opposition has clearly put it on steroids. It's sort of like a propagandist sort of line that they're taking where the Munes are like totally evil and completely like cartoonishly so, and they'll bleed Naboo dry and they don't care. Now this is true, but it's also not done with malicious intent,
Mm.
like, so it's like, and also if they do a good job of it, that they'd want to preserve the resource. It wouldn't just be quite so
It's just
simple as
business, literally.
yeah,
It
it is
is
Mm.
just
just business.
business. Yes.
Yeah.
So they explain that, and then they talk about the fact that Plagueis wants to know, well, how did they find out, that we'd approached you at all? And they don't know the answer to that. So that leads him to like, okay, I'll figure that out myself. And there's not that many people who could be responsible for it, so we'll figure that one out later. But that was all he needed, really. I think he already had the answer in his head. But anyhow, then it says. I just like his use of language. So he got what he needed out, and then he gives like almost what comes off like a stock, like here's the line before you like sign, like
Mm.
kind of this is the same thing I say to
Right.
everyone almost, but it's nice how it is tailored specifically to their needs. I just like the way that Lucino phrased this. Also because just by the by, I've seen recently an interview that he did, and Lucino does not speak the way that he writes. He
Mm.
writes much more beautifully than he speaks. No shade to the guy. He just talks like a normal guy. But it's just the fact that he's able to write so convincingly from a perspective that's so outside of his brain. It really it's impressive to me. So Plagueis, he gives his little spiel. He says the royal houses need to be informed that a leap into the business of transgalactic shipping is ill-advised. Plagueis said when he reactivated the audio feed. Naboo will need funding, logistical support, and perhaps even Republic legislation, and it is precisely in those areas where Damask Holdings can serve as an intermediary. Actual funding would come from the intergalactic banking clan, and other conglomerates would be involved in assisting Naboo in tapping the plasma and in the construction of a spaceport of sufficient size to handle the ships needed to transport it. So it's like he said this 1,000 times, 1,000 different ways, but
Mm.
it is specifically to what this planet is talking about, and it's like straight to the point. And here's what it is, and there's no bells and whistles. And then there's kind of like uh I just let you sit with that, and Varun is a little bit overwhelmed by it, and it's not his position, but so he says Bon Topolo, who's the actual candidate for king at this point, will certainly want to address these points with the electorate. And then Plagueis is like, okay, so you mentioned counter allegations released by an unknown party. Like, what's that about? Like, who's got the dirt here? Like who
Mm.
can we use here? And you can already sense Palpatine's name is coming. Like it's
Mm.
like, you know what I mean? It just feels like I remember the
The
first time I
stage
read
has
it. It's
been
like
set
this has got to
at
be
this
yeah, this
point.
has got to be
Yeah,
Palpatine. Yeah. So then they explain that like 60 years ago there was a war with the Gungans, and that was also over plasma, which is not something that is widely known. He finds that out later. Um, but the point is like a extra galactic or no, like extra planetary force of mercenaries were brought to
I
the
was like,
planet.
that comes way later.
Yeah, calling
That's
them the
much
Vong
later.
would be a bit
Yeah,
extreme.
yeah, that would be a bit extreme. That would probably they probably would not. They'd want the opposite, I guess, going on here. But yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so extraplanetary mercenary force is brought in, paid for by rival royals, and some of these same people are the ones talking trash about Topolo. So as much as they're saying he's in bed with shady politicians and bankers and thugs, so are we. It just turns out most people don't know that. So like that's what Palpatine has leaked, right? So that's the information that's out there. But it's also, they explain that this is the reason, like the blowback from this whole thing in which the last hereditary monarch died. That's been the reason why the monarchy of Naboo is since an elected position.
Mhm.
It's not really essential to know that, but it's just it's just good world building. It's
Mm.
just fun, and also because a lot of people, including myself, did wonder, why is the queen elected? Why is her term of office over? In what sense is she a queen? What are her powers exactly? And after she's left office in Attack of the Clones, why are you still trying to kill her? Like, how powerful is she? She's now a senator, right? She's not a queen. So, like, what is this? Is it a downgrade or an upgrade or what is it? So it's not that you don't need an answer to all those questions. You need an answer to at least one. And so,
Mhm.
that's the problem with the prequels as they stand, in my opinion.
Right. And
Um,
and also that kinda like the divide between the Naboo and the Gungan. I think like we could all probably assume that there was some sort of conflict in the past, but just having that sort of
This I
not
think it
only
is so smarty. That's the
yeah, yeah.
example, right?
Like
Whatever, like
it's
whatever
one of
that
those things
means,
we could probably all assume, but like having it be not only confirmed, but also having plasma be the impetus for that also adds more weight to why this deal and why this is ultimately them going into the galactic trade is such a big deal for them and their people, because this is a resource that has caused them some problems in the past, so it also helps tee up the trepidation as well. So it's saying a lot while with saying a little. So again, something else Lucino is also excellent at. um
Yeah,
yeah.
it's also nice because the world is already like a part of the Republic. It's just that without the fact that without their rich loads of plasma being widely known, or their
Mhm.
ability to tap it, or their and then therefore ship it and supply it to other powers,
Mhm.
it's not seen in any way, shape, or form as a power player yet. But
Mm.
you're
Yeah.
talking about a world that relatively overnight is suddenly going to be talked about the same way they talk about Iriadu or Chandra or any of the other Corellia, like these other places. And
And
it's all the Munes doing, really, because as they say, you can't do this without us. It's like, yes, it's your world, it's your planet, but what have you got without our
Yeah, and it's
resources?
also the fact that he laid it out in such a way that it is a genuine political question as well. It's not just a case of all the evil corporations are coming in to ruin the planet. This is something that will elevate their power and influence on the galactic stage. It's something that they could arguably, as mentioned in the book, extract safely and not necessarily renewably, but at least over the course of a long period of time. It isn't just going to be strip mining the core away and leaving the planet as a ruin. If handled properly. So it's not
also some
just
Andor energy with that.
yes, yeah, exactly. It's not just clear cut that there is a genuine political question here that the people and
Mhm.
the politicians and of course the outside influences now are going to be handling. So he's done the work to properly kind of lay out the question here and lay out the situation so that we can appreciate all the nuance involved even before you get to the character work, which is plentiful by
Yeah.
itself.
Yes.
And just another minor detail, just piggybacking off what you were saying with that, it's also worth noting that like the book highlights the fact that while Naboo is of course an advanced futuristic society like most of Star Wars, compared to the rest of the galaxy though they are still fairly far behind, relatively
Mm.
speaking. They're by no
Yeah.
means primitive, but the fact that they don't have the same sort of sources, the same sort of tech that the banking clan obviously has access to, which is also a big point. It's a good way of like why they need this, how they need it, and what differentiates them from the players that they're working with, and kind of adding to Naboo culture as well. So again, all
Yeah.
of that's really appreciated here too.
Very much so. And the argument is one of sort of like a, isolationist, protectionist sort of policy, and one about wanting to join the wider galaxy. Um, and that's kind of like
Mhm.
one of the only things that's interesting about the young Palpatine is the sincerity he seems to have about that ambition for his world. Like that being part and parcel to like what he's angling for, because he doesn't know that he's being courted by the Dark Lord of the Sith, and he's actively trying to run away from him, like before he realizes what he's all about.
Yeah.
So
This
it's
It's,
it's it's
it's an
nice that
amusing
it,
visual as for the its
yeah.
initial introduction of these two Sith. He's looking over his shoulder and sort of just speed walking away
Yeah.
on a
I
university
mean, to be
campus.
I mean,
fair, if you saw Plagueis walking
if you
towards
saw a
you, I
giant
would
moon, yeah,
Well, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And
yeah,
just but the fact that he's walking across this university grounds with like a map and just like, excuse me, you student, could you tell me where this random student is? And he's like, oh, him?
yeah,
Yeah, I think
We'll
I saw
we'll
it that way.
we'll get to that in a sec, but, like, obviously, Palpatine gets, name dropped here, and I could just,
yeah.
read a
Do you
bit
want to read
here.
that? Do
Uh,
you want to read that
his
whole
interest
passage?
piqued, Plagueis said. "What is the name of the royal family?" "Palpatine." "And the son?" "Just that. He goes by the cognomen alone." Now, we mentioned this before we started recording, but I think this was the first time I'd ever heard the word cognomen used, another one of those interesting sort of phrases, and I got the definition here. Cognomen is third person name given to an ancient Roman citizen, typically passed down from father to son. It is also sometimes used in place of a nickname. So you could actually read a lot into that depending on how you want to interpret Palpatine's sort of dynamic with his line, because I think there was a lot of theorizing going around back in the day that Palpatine's original name was actually Kasinga, like his father,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
obviously that was never directly
But it
confirmed. But
became Sheev, a few
Mm.
oh
years later.
god,
Which
Yeah.
is funny because
But
that's
was
all
that
this
a
really is. It's him kind of skating around the fact that I can't give him a name
yeah,
after all this time. I've got
yeah.
to just work
right?
around it, right? And then the very next
Well, that
book,
was my question.
it's
Is
going for Sheev.
Tarkin it came out in Tarkin, yeah, the Sheev name. Was
Yeah.
it? Does anyone know if that was like a Lucas directive? Did Lucas say
No
his name
idea.
Sheev?
No clue.
No clue. Okay, because it just really feels
I
off,
don't
like
think
to do it
so.
at
I mean,
all. But
that
without
was a
that,
Disney
I
book,
don't.
so
It's just
I
I get
doubt
that.
it.
I
it's
get.
just after
I
30
get that.
years. Did it really need to at that point? You know,
Like, why would
they managed to make
anyone
it work all
like
this time.
like
Right.
outside of Lucas? I can't imagine who would have the pull or even really the desire. Like
Mm.
it's one of those weird. It just feels like something Lucas would do. Like that isn't a good idea, but he has the power to do it. Um, Anyone else, just what are you doing and why are you doing this? But yeah, his name in, and I don't know where this came from. We're talking about like stuff like that had like black and white like pictures, like without like pre-color editions of like character guides. For some reason, I mean, the Emperor, there were all sorts of weird things about the Emperor before, like we had a more modern Star Wars timeline, you know, with more sources to like he had like a harem of like women, you know, and stuff, just weird stuff. He had like a secret son, you know,
Oh,
at
yeah,
one
with, like,
point or
3
something.
eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Triclops guy or something. And then
Yeah.
uh in those sources, I'm pretty sure that's where you had, for whatever reason, the idea that his name was Kos or Kos or Cos, which is I'm sure the only reason why Kasinga has the name that he has was because
Trying to make that work.
Lucino was like referencing
I can
that
believe
stuff
it.
in the Lucino way. So very much so, it feels like Palpatine is supposed to be named for his father, who he despises, so he doesn't go by that name. He goes by Palpatine. And they
Mhm.
get more into the weeds of and wherefores of that during like the speeder ride, which I want to talk about a little bit later. Because I'm not sure if he was just dropping details here, but can I just read something real quick and just to uh, string that along? When
Mhm.
they talk about the conflict from 60 years ago, it says, this is Varuna explaining like what happened with the Gungans. Roughly 60 standard years ago, at the height of a war between the Naboo and the Gungans, our monarch was killed, and it has now emerged that some members of the very same royal houses that opposed Toplo struck a secret deal with a mercenary group to intervene in the war should the Naboo suffer further setbacks. Fortunately, the conflict was resolved without the need for outside help. In fact, as a result of that conflict, the monarchy has since been an elected rather than hereditary post. So they mention the fact that the monarch was killed. I don't think that they ever name the monarch, but it feels like possibly that was Palpatine's ancestor. It like he's the only one who's noted to have died, and he dies in a duel, the secretive duel that takes place at the lake house. So it's presumably the reason why the larger conflict with the mercenary doesn't kick off into full-blown war, and the reason why it was able to be hushed up a bit. So it feels to me like possibly the Palpatine line was the royal line, and it's sort of like he's growing up as like one of the first generations without the entitlement of just the throne belongs to me. And he never says that, though. You know, he never actually comes out and says it. He also talks about the fact that he was thinking about going by his distaff line, which I think refers to a mother's matrilineal royal ancestry, which maybe that means we're also told that Elsinore Dentasia of Griswold or whatever, it says in the passage about her, it says she's the one who dispatched the expeditionary fleet of humans to the planet 4,000 years ago, and to whom some Naboo claim to be able to trace an unbroken ancestry. So I don't know if he's saying that his mother came from that line. He's proud of that fact as well. But either way, it's a nice way of sort of hinting at where some of Palpatine's Palpatine-ness,
Proclivities.
yeah, like might have come
Mania.
from, you know, like you don't need to explain it, to be honest, but I mean, I always pictured him as like an ancient evil spirit, like when I was younger, like before we got into, oh, he's just like a normal old man who like got ugly because he zapped his face. It's like, okay, you know, that's weird, but fine. I just like when he's doing like his whole rise, my friend, like to Vader or whatever, like, oh, this guy's the devil, he's been around forever, like, you know what I mean, like that's what I thought. But no, he was a lawyer and just a shitbag and became president and didn't want to resign, you know, like, which has its power in a way, but it's not what I was imagining when I was a kid, to be honest, you know.
I was halfway between the two ideas. Like I never thought of him as this eldritch being, but I just didn't care about his origins. Like I did not need to know that. But if you're going to give him origins, this is the way to do it. You know, this is the way to
Right.
kind of feed it in. He never explicitly comes out and says that I value all the things you just mentioned with the whole matrilineal lineage, etc. He doesn't come out and
He
say,
hints at it.
yeah,
Hints at
exactly,
it, you
exactly.
know?
It's
But you get enough to where you
The
buy
fact that
it
he was thinking
either way.
about replacing his given name with that name,
that makes
yeah,
sense.
Right.
Yeah, people can kind of pick
And
and
he
choose where his kind of insights and where his perspectives kind of have taken root. What caused that?
yeah.
They've got their preferences then, which
Mhm.
is good for a character that had so much left in mystique for all those years.
And he even says in that sequence, I that he didn't reject the line he was born into. He rejected the
Name
name
was
he was
given.
given, which
Yeah.
kind of further implies the whole, named after his father thing, given the
Yeah.
hatred.
Sure,
Because
he
he
absolutely should have been named after his father. In my opinion, like that makes given this backstory. Before this story, I mean, I didn't care what his name was, but if you're
Yeah.
going to explain his name, like this, absolutely is the only. Sheev is just so random, and the fact that he hates his father and he doesn't want to be known by his name, it's sort of like he's just a drama queen. He's a one name person. He's Cher, but
exactly.
like no,
It's the
he
perfect
actually
excuse.
has a reason for it.
Yeah, it's the perfect
Yeah.
excuse if you're going to provide one. This should be it, like you say.
Yeah.
It's very
And
well
it
chosen.
is interesting to point out too, because it's like he obviously it's implied that him taking on the family name, this has been something that's been going on for a very long time, because everyone of his friends and like the youth program, like the students Plagueis talks to, like he's just Palpatine to them. So it's like it's implied that this is something that he took on for quite some time, and no one
Yeah.
even questions that. Again, that little bit of world, because we obviously don't get a story of like him actually doing that, which obviously we don't need, because it's not the point of the sequence. But again, little bit, I like how it's just Lucino again, like going back to saying a lot without directly saying it, implying to the point where you understand that, okay, this is meaningful to him. You don't need to go in and actually show us a flashback of him taking on the Palpatine name and rejecting his given name. Like, we can assume that. So
Yes.
again, really nice.
Now this is where, so the meeting kind of like ends around this idea of like, oh, Palpatine, that's the informant, that's our starting spot, like that's what we can look into on the outskirts of just the actual business meeting and like the business lunch and like the presentation of how we're going to do this. While that's going on, like Plagueis is like, I want to go talk to that person and figure out what's going on there. So that's where the scene kind of breaks. But then you get one of my favorite passages in the book. I love the way that this is phrased, and I think it plays really well with. I think Kellen, you were the one who mentioned this a little while ago. The idea that the Force is kind of playing a cosmic joke, or and Evan, you had mentioned that in some sense, this meeting is kind of what solidifies the fact that the grand plan will begin to culminate, because it's sort of like these two things coming in. It's not so much Plagueis or Palpatine like isolated, it's the confluence of them coming together is something that the Force almost seems to want to maybe stop. Like it is like, just from this description, it's really good. It says this, I love this passage, it's one of my favorite, not just in the chapter but in the whole book, and it's simple language, and it's beautiful language. It says, later it would be said by Naboo and Gungan alike that they couldn't recall a colder winter than the one that followed Higo Damask's autumnal visit to their world. The rivers and even the falls below Theed froze. The rolling plains and tall forests were blanketed 3 meters deep with snow. Plasmic quakes rocked the Gala mountains, and the lake country, the holy places, and the undersea city of Otogunga. And many of the egresses of the underwater ways that hollowed the planet were blocked by ice floes. It just feels like the whole planet is sort of like trying to come to a
It's shivering.
standstill and stop this.
It's shivering
And
as a response to
it's
his very
not.
presence.
Yeah.
And the great thing, it's not as he's there. It's after he's been there. It's
as he's
after the
left.
meeting
Yeah,
is taken. Later,
exactly.
it would be said. It's not as cheesy as he steps foot on the planet and it goes.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not like it's not like
Volcanoes
a
erupting in the
Dementor
background.
coming in
Yeah.
through. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not like
exactly.
a Dementor effect where like windows are freezing as he's walking by. Although that's
it's like a
that's cool in its
sickness.
own way.
Yeah, it's a
But
sickness he's leaving
Yes.
behind. It's
a
a
plague,
taint
you
or a
could say.
corruption. Yeah, exactly,
Plague,
exactly.
yes.
It's so perfectly handled for how, and again, the fact that it's not so extreme. It's not like actual natural disasters breaking off. It's just like an extreme winter for them.
It's in retrospect, much later, it would be said, yeah, we can't. If you think about it, we can't recall a colder winter than that one, not this one, that one from years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's very much something shifted. that
Yeah,
that
we also
that day or that year. Like
And
it's very, very cool.
and that it also helps too that we very, very rarely get like visualization of like snow on Naboo. So the fact that it's such a juxtaposition to what we're used to, not just in the films, but just in the EU in general, it instantly sets the tone for okay, this is something that had a major impact because it's not like just like oh the rain was a bit more that year. Or, oh the sun was kind of dimmed by the clouds. It's like no, there was like a snowstorm. So
Yeah.
it's a good way of like teeing up the difference with the effect and why it sticks in their memory in particular.
And I like as well that it works for his as I mean we talked about the fact we enjoy his mundane mask, him as Ego de Mask rather than Plagueis, but it works for that more than if arguably than the fact that he's Darth Plagueis, because no one knows about that
Mhm.
part. They just know that he was the extremely influential and powerful figure that came to the planet and changed their entire way of life. So it makes
Yes.
sense that this would be a historical note that someone would draw a comparison to,
Mhm.
or draw correlation to rather.
Mhm.
Looking back on it.
Also, you could almost see it as a nice little callback to like Palpatine, causing a rainstorm on Coruscant in Revenge of the Sith, right before Order 66 and like the blanketing of the sky with the shadows and all
Did he
that.
do that? I literally never knew that.
I
I
mean,
Palpatine
didn't
I
know that
was
always,
either.
I
I'll be
always got,
honest.
I always got the impression that, like, with the darkness, of Order 66 about the fall, and
Oh,
What
that
would
it
be
I
was
just
funny?
just
thought
What
like
would be
rain
funny is
was
he
that
just
wasn't
planet
like
consciously, he
that.
wasn't consciously doing it, but he was just so evil that
Well,
it just kind of happened.
well, we know Coruscant is also manually climate controlled, so he could have literally just turned a lever or ordered that it rained. It didn't even have to be mystical and force based. So that's even more hilarious. Like
I guess. I
I'm
don't
gonna
know.
set some mood music for the
I
for
always, I always
what's the
interpreted it that
track?
way
What's the
because
track that
because of
plays to
like
that, to the Order
uh,
66?
Order 66.
Yeah, what is that? Is that the name of the soundtrack? I can't remember off the top of my head. But
no,
yeah,
like or Anakin's dark deeds.
yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
like
So
for example,
let's
like
set the mood. Hit the
yeah,
climate.
when like Mace goes to confront, Sidious, I remember in the book it said something like, once the hatchway closed, the Jedi Temple stood alone against the night. Like I always implied
Yes.
that to mean
Yeah,
that the
that was really
darkness
cool.
is.
Yeah.
I always implied that to mean that the darkness of the dark side was causing the weather to change just based on stuff like that.
I just never put it together. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just literally never even entered my thought. I literally, as I think about it, I just thought Vader looks cooler on the stretcher in rain than not. That's all I was. Yeah, that's all I
That's
was
okay.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Like I'm not saying it was like an implicit thing that Sidious was
yeah,
doing. It was just the
yeah,
dark side,
just
affecting
the Force
nature.
itself. Yeah,
Mm.
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
everything. Yeah.
It's a terrible day for rain for any anime fans out there.
I love the description in the book though of like when the Jedi leave the temple, it's like they're taking the light with them forever. They're
Mhm,
not coming back. The light is not coming back. It's dark now forever. It's really, really good.
mhm.
Um but anyway, so like they make their way to, Naboo. It's time for the meeting. I like Lucino doesn't particularly seem to feel the need to have like an excuse to go on his tangents. He just that's who he is. Like as
Mm.
an author, like when he wants to talk
Mm,
about something expository or talk about the world building. But I really like the door he left for himself for like how to go on and on about like what he thinks of humans. And it
Mm.
was because humans like to serve food at business meetings, and Plagueis just thinks that's horrible. But he
mhm,
puts up with it because humans are important people to deal with. But that's the whole reason for it's the practice of consuming food while conducting business was one that Damask had grown to tolerate in his dealings with humans, but in secret he detested it. For many years, he had detested the company of humans as well. Barbaric meat eaters that they were, humans were highly evolved species. Given their native intelligence and shrewd faculties, they deserved to be treated with the same deference mutants were afforded. And yet, many of the galaxy's sapient species considered themselves to be equal to humans, who had only themselves to blame. I love that who had only
Mm.
mhm.
themselves to blame.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It means unlike mutants, humans had no compunctions about lowering themselves to the level of less advanced beings. Han Solo. Like humans will live like Han Solo, and so they deserve to be treated like Wookiees or the rest of
Yeah,
them. Like that's what he's saying. I
mhm,
mean,
It's a
they
very
allow
Mune
themselves,
perspective.
yeah,
right.
because they're
But that
basically heightened humans. They're
Mm.
long lived. They look kind of like humans. They're just long, um, and they live longer, and they have like 3 hearts. But that's it, really. Like otherwise, they're just hoity-toity humans, you know.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just I love that little, like, how do you get to that place? They serve food, and I just think that's so
Yeah.
it isn't
It's
done. So
is
that's my whole thing, you know.
is the implication with these sequences that Munes don't eat meat at all,
Yeah,
or is it
they're
just not
clearly they're clearly vegetarian. They make a
Yeah.
note of like when he it's not that they can't, because obviously Plagueis does eat like somebody's heart later.
right?
As you
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Yeah,
They just
The
obviously
barbaric practice, as he says, but then
yeah.
they'll be happily eat an
They're
heart.
Yeah.
they're obviously like omnivorous or have the capacity to be so, but they just have no need of eating meat and don't care for it. Clearly,
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
when he's hosted slash kidnapped by Palpatine later, Palpatine's father, Kasinga. He makes a point of pointing out there's lunch here and there's no meat here. It's all fruit and vegetables and stuff like salad. And Plagueis is like just silently like whatever. But they, like,
Mhm.
clearly, you know, the menu was like prepared for him. You know, so they're vegetarian.
Right, right.
Um, but yeah, you know, it's
I
just
mean,
it's
consuming food while doing business, I think some people can relate to that. You're cool with it or you're not, That's
yeah,
a
it's
very
not
business
a
sort of approach to it.
Well, it also
yeah.
sets up what become later with Palpatine setting the table. Palpatine Senior, specifically having done
Right.
the research to know that that was not the done thing with Mune. So it's even though he's still fumbling in the fact that they would rather not eat any of the tool, he's at least prepared the right diet for them. So it's
Mhm.
Yeah,
set up to let that pay off and show you
I
it's a nod to how okay this guy's shrewd. He's
Palpatine's
not
father,
brilliant, but he's
like,
shrewd.
yeah, Palpatine's
right.
father attempted the most polite kidnapping possible. Like, he was being very reasonable, you know, very reasonable, you know, like, to start
Uh,
off with. But
I
then,
love
yeah,
the dialogue later when he's like, "The presence of armed guards seemed to indicate an absence of choice," Kasinga.
that's a
He's like,
great line. Yeah,
Yeah.
those were for
that's
your
probably my
protection."
favorite line in that bit. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to that
Um,
in a sec, but that's always good. But to your point though, Callan, I didn't think of it like that, like because Kasinga doing that much shows that he's slightly above the people that he's meeting with now, but still
Mm.
not quite to the point of like a full on, which is something else that's brought up in the book later with when Palpatine's even insulting him, head and shoulders
yeah,
above you, all that
Mm.
yeah.
jazz. So that's
I
interesting
mean,
too.
yeah, it's like what you're saying is like, fair play to Mr. Palpatine, but he's playing the game against Plagueis. It's not fair. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
of course he's
Right.
gonna come off looking like worse, you know.
And Plagueis doesn't hold back about
But
it either. He does just kind
no,
of rub his nose in it. You just kidnapped me, sir. I'm not going to be civil here.
yeah. But it's also this long flowing thing about humans. It also kind of hints at like, why are humans always like the star of things? And I don't know if you buy
Mm.
it or not, but it's at least an attempt.
Yeah.
It's a stab at it. It said what made them especially intriguing was their seeming intent to spread themselves to the far reaches of the galaxy without any sense of control or planning, at whatever cost, and using up world after world in their insatiable quest, as if their diaspora from the core reflected some sort of species imperative. More important, the Force seemed not only to allow their unchecked dissemination, but to support it. In human hands, Damask suspected, rested the profane future of the galaxy. So there's
Mm.
your reason
Right.
for why humans are always the stars. And it sounds nice,
Well,
whether it's true or
it
not,
is.
you know.
Yeah, and just from like a building perspective too, it kind of feeds into something that Star Wars has always been kind of coy on, like because we don't actually know what the origin of the human species in Star Wars is,
Yeah, that's
aside
true.
from the fact that it's implied not just in this work but in several others that humans originated somewhere in the deep core, but where that was, when it was, all of that has kind of always been kept intentionally vague, which I've
Because they
always been
came from Earth in a
Yeah,
cheese ball,
exactly.
like a cheese ball way. That I'm sure that was the temptation, like early on, before people realized let's not do that.
Yeah.
Maybe. I could
Yeah,
that definitely seems like something Lucas would consider, but I do like the fact that they sort of keep that continuity because, like, I mean, honestly, like, the whole origins of humanity in Star Wars, I have always felt about it the same way I feel about like Yoda's species. Like, I don't
Mm.
need to know. The mystery's
yeah.
fine,
It just
you
doesn't
know.
matter. It just does
It
not
doesn't
Yeah,
matter
matter.
at all for
When
anything.
you're not dealing with like Star Trek, it's almost never that they're from Earth.
Mm.
right.
The only show I can think of where it was like necessary is like Battlestar Galactica. That's baked into
Mm.
their their their
Mythos.
creation story. Yeah, everything
You got to get
else. I
around to
mean,
that one of these days.
We
Yeah,
do.
we
personally.
should.
It's
Yeah, but you
very,
don't
very
think
good.
about where humans come from and and literally anything else. They're there
Right.
because they're us. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Period.
And we don't, and obviously to get into the meta weeds of it, just because I'm sure someone will bring it up if we don't. But like, obviously, in the original trilogy, they were very limited with like the amount of costumes they could make. So that's why there's relatively few aliens in
Mhm.
the first two films in particular. So
Always
they
budget.
had to yeah, they had to justify it. Which I mean, for
Yeah,
1977, you kind of understand the limitations
Yeah.
they were dealing with.
and we're
We
always
should
I'm
we
not
should be
sad.
saying
grateful we got Chewbacca, to be honest.
Yes,
yeah.
that's true. We're always sad that there aren't like more aliens doing more important things. I think the closest is like the Acolyte, which is like a stupid story, but there's lots of aliens doing things in that.
Hmm.
But so yeah, I would really love one where like a story where the alien was the main character. I've always
Hmm.
kind
Yeah.
of wanted that, but
It'd be
that'll
great if
never
they could
You
happen.
pull
know,
it
in
off.
in the in the
I guess
rotunda.
I guess
Well,
Ahsoka,
Ahsoka,
but
yeah,
I don't watch
yeah.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
And also,
yeah,
she's not really
And
in the sense of it's just a human with a
yeah,
wig hat on, you know, in terms of like the
pretty
alienness
pretty much. It's
of
yeah.
the production.
well, like I mean, in the rotunda, you could see ET's species in there. So if you want something starring an alien, go watch that. There you go.
See, that's also like people need to understand like Easter eggs are supposed to be fun. I think you can see like an X-wing
Hmm.
on
Mhm.
Coruscant during like the Attack of the Clones chasing the bounty hunters bit. Like I'm pretty sure you can see an X-wing in there, which shouldn't be there,
It's all
but
in good fun.
it's it's an Easter egg. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But somebody
Don't take
somewhere's got a chart of why that was there. It was a prototype, and there,
maybe Lucino has
Uh,
that somewhere. Who knows?
well, the
Lucino,
Falcon
But
arrives at the
yeah,
Senate as well, doesn't it? The thing's rife with them.
yeah,
oh
So,
yeah, and Revenge
yeah,
of the Sith. I forgot about that. Yeah.
hmm.
Well,
But
that
yeah,
really doesn't make sense. But again, it doesn't matter. It really does not matter. It doesn't matter. It
not
doesn't
at
matter.
all.
It's fun.
Not at all.
Don't
So
some things you really don't have to overthink. It's okay.
Hmm.
yeah. So then the meeting goes on. We list all the companies that are going to be involved. I love just the name dropping of all these things to make it sound like just this horrendous nightmare of like, conglomerates from outside, coming in and just taking over. It's like funding from the IBC will be allocated to tapping the plasma reservoir beneath the plateau. And at the same time, outer rim construction and assembly will do this. And the Verdugo plunge will have this going on. And we'll design this in neoclassical design and the Sodio River and all this stuff. Trade Federation will come in and they'll do this. And like it's all just like
Mhm.
It's scene setting
okay,
and paying, like you said, the
yeah,
verisimilitude. Just putting all that effort in to make sure this feels like it's real and these are real characters in the real
yeah,
Yeah.
world. And the richness of Star Wars as a setting. These are the strengths of it. You
Mhm.
can pull things together from different parts and make
Yeah.
it feel like it's a
The
part of the real story.
the, pl- the yeah, the plasma refinery station, which is where the Duel of Fates takes place. Why
Yeah.
does it look like that? What's the
yeah.
point of all that? So
Yeah,
this is
exactly.
literally quite literally the blueprints of that. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's also like they go through the effort of explaining we're going to do all this without fucking up the landscape. It'll still be
Mm.
beautiful and all that.
Yeah.
That's how much thought. This is how much we want this. We're going to do it
Mm.
right because it's so valuable and we need it. We don't need it, but we want it. Like who wouldn't want it? And then at the whole time, like the guy's face was falling, and like at the end of it, he just looks horrified, and he's like, "Well, clearly you've put a good deal of thought into this. But is there no room in your plans for Naboo firms?" I love Lars Hill. The last thing we want is to have these construction projects be seen as signs of foreign occupation. Our partners wish to work closely with Naboo's own plasma energy engineering and the Theed Space Vessel Engineering Corporation to make certain that the improvements are viewed as a cooperative effort. Not that they are,
Yeah,
just that
exactly. He
they're viewed that way.
specifically says viewed and perceived, which is hilarious to me. Like
Yeah,
even to
yeah,
the person who should be picking up on these warning signs and
yeah.
red lights, he's just
Yeah,
like,
twice
nope.
he said it. Twice he highlighted. This is all
Yeah.
about appearances' sake. Like twice, and then he promises, when the construction phases are completed, the refinery and spaceports will be under your full control. And then there's like some doubt about that, and they're like,
Mhm.
I don't know about that. But then Plagueis is like, only until the plasma begins to flow, and he's just like so, you know, charismatic about it, and
Mm.
and you want to believe it, and also you can't do this without them.
Yeah.
There's that just
Right.
that raw temptation,
Mhm.
but it's like so they kind of it is nice that they have that bit of there's something nagging at them, like we know this is not really kosher, right? But like the devil's like here, he's tapping on your shoulder. He's like, hey, come on, like
And there
Right.
like
are legitimate
Hades, right?
benefits as well.
Yeah,
Even with the whole obvious negative risks, even if the risks do go to the worst possible scenario for them, they still get all the benefits that come with it. So it's like I
well,
said, it's a
that's talked
genuine.
about later.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
they talk. Yeah, they talk about like
it's
Palpatine's mentor. not
Vidar?
Rondar, his father, Vidar Kim. Yeah, that's right.
Hmm.
He talks about the fact that we got rich, but not nearly as rich as we were supposed to get. Like, I mean, like not
Right.
nearly as rich. Like,
Yeah.
like they talk about that later. So
It's just interesting and well calculated
Yeah.
that the kind of the options he's gone for to make this believable and sellable and still
Like, if you
interesting. You know, it's not just these politicians being idiots; it's politicians being
Yeah.
believably, fooled.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's like if you struck oil in your backyard, there's gonna be a lot of things, ramifications of that, who you're
Mm.
making deals with, and what, how it can benefit you and potentially not benefit you. So it's always,
Yeah.
playing politics with
What it
these sorts of
shakes
things.
out is you're going to get a 13% cut of what's coming out of your land. Have fun with that. It's better than nothing, isn't it? Better than
Mm.
nothing.
Yeah.
But everybody else is running away with the rest.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Bureaucracy at its finest.
yeah, lawyer fees, man. Like, yeah, so like you won the judgment, but here's my bill. Anyway, and so like all of this is going on. I like that like Varuna cuts. He's the one to like. He's a much more skilled politician than Topola, the guy running clearly, and so that's where he's the one that kind of smooths everything over, paints everything in a better light, and everybody starts going, "Oh yes, yes."
Literally applauding.
Literally,
point,
someone
yeah.
like holds up the glass and says, "Here, here." I mean, that's so.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah, but I like
Depressing to read.
that yeah, like I like that Plagueis though is like one day soon Varuna will be the king of Naboo. Like this guy's my new stooge. This other guy's
Yeah.
a placeholder. After his term of office, it's
It's-
gonna be Varuna and he'll do what I
it's-
say.
Yeah, it's a little on the nose with future events, but like you buy it enough, especially given we had all this build up to all this deal making. So
It's because the
I'm
character is the way that the character is, the amount of power he's
Yeah.
already been like proven to have through his gathering and through his connection to everybody. The fact that he can put who he wants into the chancellorship, he's just been waiting for the right opportunity. Like
true.
it's not
Mhm.
hard for him to pull off this kind of a thing,
Right.
And it's not, you can't get away with that with every character, but with like 1,000 years worth of like Sith buildup and resources and waiting and expertise and capital,
Mhm.
it works. It just works.
And it helps too that like Plagueis himself has been around for over 100 years at this point, so he's played
Yeah.
the game so much that like he knows what pieces to move to get what results as needed. So again, you buy it.
Yes.
And on top of
Now,
all
the rest
that, in
of
terms of
this-
what we're told about him, we're also seeing the expertise, seeing the skill, seeing the craft, seeing the discussions, the way he's thinking. It's perfectly believable. This is not just, we need to say he's rich and powerful, influential. No, we see that with pretty much every single conversation with every character he ever meets. And yeah, we get this scene where Plagueis is walking his way across university grounds, as I mentioned earlier. It's just an amusing interaction between him and a random student. I'm reading it from the book here. Plagueis located the student center and went to the registration desk, which was staffed by a young, fair-haired human who stared openly at him as he approached. "I'm looking for a student named Palpatine," he said in Basic. "I know him," she said, nodding. "Do you know where I might find him just now? Is he perhaps attending a class?" She blew out a breath. "He comes and goes. Maybe I saw him at the youth program building. Maybe. I think it was him." Humans, Plagueis thought. "Can you direct me there?" I love how completely unreasonable he's being here. It's like, why would this random student have any idea where Plagueis is, or Palpatine
Why
is
would I
rather
know
at
what
this
that
point?
secretive asshole is doing day to day? Like, fuck off, sir.
And also, you're like a towering mune in the middle of nowhere. Like, why are you here? It's
I
like,
can't
what?
pass out his personal information.
Exactly.
You want me to get sued? like goodbye.
I'm literally
mean-
just working here to get some extra credits on my.
Yeah, I mean, she's at the registration desk, so theoretically she would have some knowledge of this. But like you say, why would she tell him if she did? And she'd have to look it up anyway.
That's sort of like, because this is the guy when we first met him popped out of like a freezer to talk to the people he'd like stolen
Yeah.
right on their
Also-
ship and thought nothing of it.
Yeah.
They won't think this is weird. If they do, who
Yeah.
cares? Like,
So 2 bits I really like from that is the fact that he addresses her in Basic. It establishes just like point blank, because this is like a planet with like multiple different dialects. So again, him just defaulting to Basic also makes sense given that he's at a university. He doesn't quite know what the standards are. So again, little bit I appreciate. And then the fact that she hands him a flimsy map, like not like a data pad or anything, or like, telling him a flimsy map. And I'm just imagining the visual of Plagueis just walking around.
Exactly,
campus,
yeah.
holding
Like I was saying earlier, it's
all
so
that.
comical.
There's something
Just,
amusing about that.
Walking on
I don't know.
university grounds and just like, where's this going? And then also just the visual, like I say, calling after Palpatine. It's like, you young boy. It's just like Palpatine. You're like, oh god, don't turn around. I don't want to be seen by this weird mune.
Mhm.
But I also always picture in Sith robes here, even though he's obviously not. Like I'm still envisioning with him walking around with his cloak on because I'm an idiot apparently.
Well, he
Well, he's
kind of
probably
is.
wearing
I mean,
he's probably wearing
he's
a
wearing.
cloak. It's probably not a
They
Sith
talk.
cloak.
They talk about the fact that Damask Holdings doesn't dress like the actual people who work for the actual banking clan. They do wear black outfits, so he kind of does always look like a Sith, even when he's not in full blown Sith regalia. But I just imagine it looking like a more elegantly cut, just sort of the way that like Palpatine dresses when he's not like in a robe or like with a hooded robe, that kind of a thing. It's clearly extra, like it's not something any of us would wear, but it's not out of place like for the Star Wars galaxy.
I mean, we
Just happens
can.
to be
I mean,
black.
Particularly on
we
Naboo,
can wear
you know.
them if we want. We just might get some weird looks.
Yes,
You
very
definitely
true.
get some weird looks. Yeah. But you do you.
Um,
But yeah, so this is the first meeting between Palpatine and Plagueis. I like that Palpatine tries to excuse himself from it because that's immune, and I just fucked around in their business. I don't want to talk to him. Bye-bye.
Vidar Kim,
Like,
we mentioned before, his mentor in the
Mhm.
youth program, obviously
Yeah.
ties into the comic with Ronhar and all that during the Clone Wars.
Yeah, there's a lot more to talk about with that, like in the details later during the book's second act. We'll get to that stuff in further detail. And maybe someday Callan will read the damn comic.
We'll get there when we
Someday.
get there. I'm excited to go that.
But yeah, so I like that Palpatine's first instinct is that of the coward. He tries to leave. He doesn't want this because he's not necessarily he's obviously clearly aware that he has abilities already. And he's shrewd and conniving and sure of himself, but at the same time would rather not expose myself, would rather not take the risk, would rather not do an actual head-to-head confrontation here. His first instinct is to look for a way out. So I really like that. I don't have much to say about the actual conversation itself, other than that, like it's well done. I'm more interested in some of the ones to follow. My favorite thing, I think, is let's see, when Plagueis asks him, he starts kind of probing him about like his relationship with like his father a little bit, and he's like, oh yeah, well please, are you planning to divulge this? And like Plagueis is like, what might happen if I did? And Palpatine says, well, to begin with, my father would murder me. And then completely sincerely, Plagueis says, literally. Like he really like he to him that's totally a possibility. Just like I'm just curious here. Like is that? But anyway, so that was that. It's basically just an establishment of that's how much animosity there is between the father and son. Is that it's conceivable that he would actually kill his son over this. So that's an interest. Like for a Sith, that's like, oh, I've got the workings of something now. I can make something out of this. That's pretty much the point of the scene. Nothing much else gets accomplished there, and it's sort of a follow-up. It's followed up in the next chapter with Palpatine wants to take him speeder riding, like for a joyride.
Palpatine has a
visual
passion
again.
for racing, which I never would have suspected when I first read this. That's
Yeah,
an interesting
no.
character beat. I guess that also means there's like an alternate universe out there somewhere where Palpatine became a professional racer. Can you imagine?
Oh, I thought you were going to say like he bonded with Vader over pod racing.
I was going to say,
Or that,
this
maybe.
is pod racing. Yeah, no.
Who knows?
It's a funny visual apart from anything else, but also I don't necessarily think I would have chosen the racer as a kind of lens for this, but I like the fact that it leans into the fact that Palpatine's kind of a bit of a hedonist. He's more of the kind of passionate, the impulsive, the emotional side of the dark side, rather than the cool and calculating, introspective, cerebral side that we've seen with Plagueis up to this point. It's interesting and kind of a natural fit to put these two together and be the complementary kind of team that they end up being until the obvious ending conclusion. But yeah, it is just a bizarre concept picture. Even a young Palpatine is like a racer in a speeder bike or a speeder car. But not to say nothing of the fact that Mune's being quite tall. It means that he's kind of sat in the seat with his head kind of pulled back as they're driving at a high pace. Yeah. It's just a funny visual.
Well, and actually during this we get a little bit of more world building about the relations between the Naboo and the Gungan as they pass by like a trading spot. This little sequence I just like to read because there's a lot of character here. One moment. Okay, Palpatine pointed to the distant tree line. There are some ancient runes in there, but that's Gungan territory. Have you had any dealings with them? Personally, no, but I've seen the ones that come into how do you say that?
Marinia or
Moena,
something.
yeah,
I'm
to
not actually
trade
looking at it.
for goods. What are your thoughts about them? Aside from the fact that they are long-eared, slimy-tongued primitives? Aside from that, yes. Palpatine shrugged. I don't mind them, so long as they keep to their submerged cities and waterways. Don't get in the way. Exactly. Humans deserve to have the upper hand here. Plagueis could not restrain a smile. There are many worlds in the galaxy where the matter of who has the upper hand, as it were, is in dispute. Again, that little interaction, there's quite a bit that goes into that for one thing, again, the relations between the Naboo and the Gungans, the fact that they're trading, but there's still that tension there. Palpatine's view of them, his sort of again, his anti-alien tendencies, which obviously
Mhm.
became a big facet in the Empire, kind of established here as well. Um, Also, the fact that Plagueis couldn't restrain a smile. That's very interesting because this literally comes one chapter after he had his little thought process about humans having the upper hand and their position in the larger galaxy. So it's interesting because already you can see the wheels turning behind Plagueis's brain and what he can make of this and how Palpatine how they relate to each other just on a very fundamental level, even though they're coming at it from different perspectives.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
he's
don't know
seeing
how.
or recognizing kind of the strings of fate here. Like he's seeing, oh, the dark side has
Mm.
given me this gift. It's come to me as I thought
Yeah.
it would. And it's so
Mhm.
perfectly packaged. Everything I've been thinking about literally in the last 2 days is embodied by this guy. It's like I said, Matt and I said before the cosmic joke of the Force kind of shoving these two together to self-destruct, just in a bit of a immolation that could have been preferably avoided. But the Force has its way.
I'm not so sure. Like before this, how. I mean, I guess that was like in the Thrawn trilogy that was hinted at that that Palpatine had this whole specious kick, and that was part of the
Mm.
reason why the Empire was the way that it was. I Other than that source and this now here, because even this is a bit detached. He says he doesn't actually mind them as long as they're
Mm.
not in the way. Like, and so
Mhm.
it kind of feels to me like really it's more just how people think of other people. Like in our world, plenty of people think that way about just insert group here, other people.
Mm.
Um, that's the nature. That's the story of human history. Like for the most part, sadly, but it's I don't know. Like I always kind of felt like it made more sense to me that he probably just spun that for political reasons without actually caring too much about it himself. And
Mm.
if for no other reason, I mean, his like arch nemesis or like one of the only people that could have like stood up to him in a fair fight was clearly not human. He was some kind of frogman. It's like why look down on these
It's just a
just
lot of
whatever,
self-evident stuff that
Oh,
he'd have to
yeah.
be realizing and facing, day to day,
Yeah.
that makes it so that it doesn't really
His
suit
first
the character
apprentice
for
was
him to
not
be that.
human,
Yeah, exactly.
like
Right.
It has to be
yeah.
more of a
Taking
sense of the intellectual landscape with him rather than the physical. He's not seeing the species; he's thinking of the way they think,
yeah.
and it's the alignment of how they think that is
It's
what
like
appeals to
like
him.
an ability prejudice from his
Yeah,
perspective,
yeah, that's
like
how I've
human
always seen
because
it
he literally
anyway.
says humans deserve to have the upper hand. Like he says deserve as if, innate, like proving themselves, with the colonization of Naboo and all that. So I agree with like both of you on that front. It's
Mm.
definitely something. I mean, he probably does feel it to a degree, but it's like
I mean, he's
it,
clearly racist
it's
adjacent. I just
yeah, yeah,
the idea that it's a core part of his character or like one of the reasons the Empire was brought into being, I always just thought was a bit
right. Taking
just
It's
advantage of
it,
you
it's a
what's
bit
already
simple,
there.
if nothing
Yeah.
else. Like it's not a choice we would have
simple.
made for the character, even if you could technically track like 20 different books that confirmed it. Like it's just something that doesn't appeal for his
Mhm.
sensibilities that we've seen in most of the larger works that he's
And it's not something that ever comes up in
well
the
written in.
films either, like not directly with him.
No,
Yeah,
it's not relevant until Thrawn. Like why is this blue guy allowed? And no one else was like him was allowed. Is it because he's so great?
yeah, it
That's
was
why.
proving that he's the
But I
exception to
mean,
the rule, yeah, and also explaining the fact that
yeah,
the Empire is so human centric. But that's
which
again just
again
comes down to
really,
budget.
yeah, it's what Evan said earlier. There was only
Mm,
so many costumes.
exactly.
Right.
I mean, and they were clearly inspired by Nazis in terms of like their garb and the fact that
Mm.
it's like an authoritarian regime and all the rest of it. But I mean, in very when does it ever feel like the Empire is like the point of them is to be like speciest? They're like it's
Mm.
just dominance really, like for the most part.
Right. I mean, the Empire definitely has no issues killing other humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, apart from anything else, it's just impractical as well. I mean, how many trillions of people are in this galaxy? You're going to exclusively arm your fleets and special services and any kind of institution with just humans? I mean, I know that we're pretty widespread, but we're not that widespread in the galaxy.
Right.
But,
I mean, they did have
Well, I like
clones
that.
at the beginning. They did have clones at the beginning, so you could kind of justify it at the start. But by the time of the OT, yeah, it definitely doesn't make sense.
I like that is kind of like shunted into the background a bit, where what we were talking about more comes to like the forefront of it, because after the bit you read, when Plagueis said there are many worlds in the galaxy where the matter of who has the upper hand, as it were, is in dispute. And Palpatine's answer to that is, that's because most beings are afraid to take charge. Think what the Republic Senate might accomplish under the leadership of a strong being. So this is a more intelligent version of what Padme and Anakin are talking about when they're frolicking in the field. Because she's talking about stuff and he says, well, what about Hitler? What if we had one of those? That would fix everything. And she's like, oh, that's weird.
But major red flag. But let's just skate past that.
Yeah. That's
I mean,
strike three right there. But okay.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
he's just accumulating red flags in that movie all throughout.
To be angry is to be human.
Yeah.
Stupid.
But yeah, so he says, think what the Republic Senate might accomplish under the leadership of a strong being. I have given thought to that, Palpatine. Like, what does the Senate do in response to each and every crisis? It dispatches the Jedi to restore order and moves on without addressing the roots of the problem. And Plagueis is the one who finds this youthful ignorance. He says he found the boy's youthful ignorance entertaining. And he says the Jedi could rule the Republic if they wished. He said after a moment, he goes, I suppose we should be grateful that the order is dedicated to peace. And Palpatine's like, I don't view it that way. I think the Jedi have dedicated themselves to limiting change. And I think it's funny because even though he's probably never met one, and if he has, it's been in passing and not in any kind of Sith apprentice capacity. I think he actually is closer to the truth there than Plagueis is. Like Plagueis is looking at things on more like a historical scale, and he's totally correct about the Jedi's capabilities. But in this moment in time, the way that Palpatine talks about the Jedi, that is what they've allowed themselves to be. They even say it, like towards the end of this whole trilogy, or this whole the prequel era, Yoda admits to it outright. That's his big folly. So it's an interesting conversation. Like I said, it's a very similar. The beats are very similar to some of what you see in the films. It's just done better, which is what I've always turned to the EU for.
Particularly when it's Phantom Menace adjacent, like all this, and laying all that groundwork.
Yeah,
I like as well. I mean, we'll talk about the follow-up kind of scenes between them in the following chapters, but I like how it's building each one over a period of time as well. Like even if it's just days and weeks, it's not just the first meeting they have and they just talk about all of this in one go. There's kind of a more natural flow to it, in the fact that they take pauses, they take breaks, they go away and think about things, come back to one another, etc. It's a good way of keeping it not stopping the pacing from hitting a break, considering the rest of the book. It would have been a long set of chapters if he just had a continuous conversation here and not given us more of these breaks up.
He's good at relating the larger conflict or the larger topic back to the personal. Like they're talking about something quite political, he brings it back to the personal, because Palpatine's talking about all this, strong leadership stuff, and the Jedi, they're afraid to act, and he said he'd have more respect for the Jedi if they used the Force to impose their will on the entire galaxy, the way he would, the way he someday will. And Plagueis pushes back on that because he says, do you grant your father respect when he attempts to impose his will on you? And Palpatine, he doesn't really have a good answer to that. He starts white knuckling the steering wheel and everything, and he said that's different. The reason I don't respect him is because he's not half as intelligent as he thinks he is, as though he'd be happy about it if his father were intelligent.
Yeah,
right.
It was the first little crumbling ashes of the Sith philosophy right there.
Yeah,
right. So, it only works if you're the very one on top.
Yeah, he says if he could admit to his weaknesses, I could at least pity him. So that's where he kind of saves the thought. But it's just not on. But that's where Plagueis starts realizing, and he had given him a coin to hang in his drive, like his rear view mirror, and
the Erodium.
Yeah, and it's swinging, and it is kind of, that's like the obvious symbolism of I'm gonna Your soul's up for grabs. I'm going to buy it. It's mine. And he says, like, before long, I will own this human, Plagueis told himself. Because he still isn't quite sure whether he's got the Force. He's just very enticed by him, and he's intrigued by him. And then, Palpatine talks about how the fact that his family is wealthy, but not as wealthy as the other royals anymore. He doesn't say it, but he suggests that some of that is due to his father's incompetence. It's sort of like lowered the station of the family. Plagueis asks almost a throwaway question about the mother. He says, like, does your mother share his views about everything? And Palpatine's like, not only because she doesn't have any of her own, neither do my brothers and sisters, who are never named. Also, like, none of these people are named. They don't matter. We're not even given a number, like how many exist or anything like
brothers
that.
and sisters.
They don't matter. Yeah. And Plagueis, considers all this as because Palpatine's like, going on and just kind of bitching. He's sort of taking the wheel on this one and just like, oh, don't get me started on all this. And Plagueis just weathers all of it. And then he says about how shitty everything is. He goes, and yet you honor your house by going by its name. And that's when he explains what we already talked about earlier about the fact that he hasn't rejected the dynasty he was born into. He's rejected the name he was given. And then he makes a comment of, but not for the grandiose reasons some think. Just the opposite, actually. I'm certain that you, of all beings, understand as much. And that's where Plagueis is like, there it was again, Plagueis thought. The deceptive cadence, the use of flattery, charm, and self-effacement, as if rapier faints in a duel. The need to be seen as guileless, unassuming, empathetic. A youth with no desire to enter politics, and yet born for it. I like that he phrases it as the need to be seen that way. Not just good at playing the game. This is part of his nature. Like he needs to be seen that way. He needs to play politics. Like it's core. Like it's a core personality trait. This is how he navigates life. It's not just a scheme. It's a lifestyle. This guy, he's born for this. And at the same time, not quite questioning whether he's being played himself here, like whether or not, like, you know what I mean. It doesn't
Always
seem
that
like he's
ego
asked
with
himself
him.
that question.
Yeah, we said that before, how he's often addressing issues and asking questions and raising problems, etc. But always, because in his own head he's doing it, doesn't then apply them to him. He thinks himself immune, pun not intended, to the
It's
whole.
a good pun. You should have intended this. I would not have admitted to that. That was very good. Yeah, very good.
But yeah,
yeah.
But it even establishes, like, with his reactions, it talks about how, like, when they're having this back and forth, like, Palpatine's reacting as if the plain truth was something new to him. I really like that prose because it instantly tells you a lot about just his past and his disposition, not just within, his family, but also potentially just within the hierarchy of Naboo, and like all the despite presenting themselves as such, like, a society based on like honor, there's a lot of double dealing going on behind the scenes, and that's just how it is. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But again, and it's something else too. Like Palpatine, he's like 18 here, I believe. He's
17,
as far as like
18, somewhere in there. Yeah,
something along those lines.
which is just a
he's
weird
roughly
thing to picture.
he's roughly the
Palpatine.
same age as Luke Skywalker was when we first meet him in A New Hope. So again, interesting juxtaposition there. The 18-19 range seems to be the age in Star Wars where a lot of interesting things happen to a lot of characters, because that's the same age Anakin was in Attack of the Clones, obviously. So
you're old enough to like be tempted by sexual desire and fall in love and lead battles and all the rest of that stuff. You're not too young for any of that, and at the same time you're still very much like a youth, and like, so it's a popular time to be doing all kinds of fantasy stuff, like pan
it's
genre.
interesting. Yeah, but yeah, imagine. I agree with you, Callan. It is weird to imagine Palpatine as a teenager, because obviously, we're so used to the old
With
Sith,
Darth
looks.
syphilis,
Yeah, that sort of thing. So, what's that line from Avatar Book 3? Everybody was a baby once, or something like that, when they find the Fire Lord's picture. I don't remember.
We get a touch of that in these chapters, actually, when he's confronting his dad, obviously.
Yeah. Do you want to move into that now? Because he
Yeah, we
basically
can.
asked Palpatine to be his spy, and he agrees. to feed him, like, add on the information that he's already been doing. Although I do like the fact that they immediately established that what he's giving them actually isn't too far away from what they already have, but it's the act of doing it. It's the communication he's having with Palpatine, the exposure that they're having is what truly interests Plagueis. Him taking that initiative, the underhanded double dealing is what's really impressing him, less so than the information itself, even though it is useful for what it is.
Well, yeah, because the conversation in the speeder, he's still not sure whether, like he's apprentice material, but he would really like him to be. But that scene terminates on uh Plagueis did not need to delve any further into whatever traumas had given rise to Palpatine's cunning, secretive nature. He simply needed to know, does this young human have the Force? Like, that's the only question now he really cares about.
Mhm.
The rest of the stuff, the political game on Naboo, he knows full well. Well, after a while, because think of Palpatine, if he's in my way, I could just kill him. That's pretty much, he's already
Mhm.
signed. He's already signed that death warrant. He doesn't care about. He's not worried about losing, because that's why Palpatine's lack of information isn't a problem. He's already got
Mhm.
Plan B
Yeah,
teed up.
and
Um,
yeah.
and he was gonna do it
Oh, and the
anyway,
fact,
but especially
yeah,
after he got kidnapped. Like,
Yeah.
you're gonna
It's like,
kidnap me?
excuse me?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, also just before we get into that, the fact that he can't instantly like sense the Force in Palpatine is very interesting too, because it's also a good way of like having that juxtaposition between him and the apprentices that Venemus was scouting out before, because in those interactions he could instantly not only sense the Force in them, but also kind of sense their proclivities and like kind of what they're about. But the fact that Palpatine is still a mystery to him from the get-go, again, I think that also helps to kind of pique his interest and establish, like, oh, okay, this is very different from what I had encountered previously. Let's see where this goes. So again, I appreciate that little bit of storytelling, with the juxtaposition there.
On a baser level, it also helps justify the fact that he could hide from the Jedi for all those years, because if he can do it with zero training whatsoever for the Dark Lord of the Sith, then with training, he's got there's more
Mhm.
believability to the fact that he can do it for
Yeah.
hundreds and thousands of Jedi.
Well, even even earlier when we learn about Plagueis's origin and how he kind of instinctually was like masking himself, during his upbringing,
Mm.
the fact that they're very similar in that way is also a nice master apprentice duology sort of thing going there too, which is nice to see. I mean, Plagueis even literally calls back to his childhood when he is sensing him. So there's that.
It's funny because he kind of sees a bit of himself in Palpatine without it ever kind of alluding to the fact that, oh, you remind me of myself. It's because it's not really true. They're so different. Like I said before, cold and hot. In comparison, but just there's that element of, you're the Sith I need. You're the apprentice I need. You fit the mold perfectly. Please have the Force. I need this kid to have
Yeah,
the Force. He would be so perfect. And it would also kind of
right. But it is
self-confirm
but
his idea about, even though he totally doesn't believe in fate, guys, that fate has kind of granted him the perfect apprentice in the
yeah.
dark side.
He tells himself he doesn't believe in fate, but he absolutely believes in fate.
Yeah, he's
Like, that's
Oh
constantly.
yeah.
the
He's just. He's
100%.
constantly. It's fine if the dark side lines everything up for him, but
When
if it's
fate's
some
on
kind of
his
greater
side, of
thing,
course, it's good.
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Of
he
course.
owns
When
it.
it's
Yeah.
not, then there's all this
So
reason to doubt.
yeah.
Exactly.
Did you want to talk about the Kasinga thing, or were we passing through that into the Fallout? I wasn't sure whether you wanted to
I'm
dive
fine
into
with
the actual
talking about.
thing.
I mean, there's a lot to go over there. I mean,
Okay,
this
take it away. I
introduction
just
to
wanted to. I didn't want to
yeah, yeah.
scoot ahead if you wanted to. Go ahead.
This introduction to Kasinga, like we were saying, he does basically kidnap Plagueis and takes him to the lakeside. Interestingly enough, they established that their lakefront property is close to the one that Padme's family owns, that we obviously see in Attack of the Clones with that lake country area. The Naberi family, as they were known then. Um, a bit on the nose again that's the location, but they do establish, I think, in other works that a lot of royals live on that area, so it's fine for what it is.
It's
Um,
shorthand for providing the visual as well. It means he doesn't have to spend too much time painting the picture. He can just kind of go,
exactly.
that thing
And
you
what are
saw in the
they
film, it's there.
like?
Not that
They
he's
sort
being
of
that
paint
lazy, but it's
themselves as
just that
peasants
opportunity.
almost, like later in the book. Are they royals or peasants that have been elevated to this station, or what the hell are they? I've never understood her family at all.
I'm not sure either.
I
To be
think
Sorry,
it's sort of
I guess none of
implied
us
that,
know.
like,
Sorry.
honest. Sorry.
I think it's kind of implied that like way back they were like some of the highest royalty, but like as time
Oh,
went by,
okay.
they dedicated themselves more to like the people and stuff, and like that's why they're seen as peasants. I don't know, like the royals who lowered themselves. I think that's what they're implying, but I honestly have no idea.
The good kind
Okay,
of
because
Wookiees.
like later on, they paint themselves as quite a provincial, simple people. Like much deeper into
Yeah,
the book, when it suggested that Padme be candidate for queen, her parents are very much like, we're not like that. That's not for us, you know. At the same time, here they are, like next door neighbors. But I mean, this is the summer home. This is not like the Palpatine estate.
Mm.
This is like their vacation house. The Palpatines clearly have like
hell of a vacation house.
yes, it is, but that's the point. You know, like
Yeah,
it's a weekend palace. It's not their main seat. Clearly, they call it the
right.
lake house. Like, you know, it's like it's not. It's very clearly not where they're usually hanging out.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
anyway,
So Kasinga's pretty much what you would expect from Palpatine's father. I mean,
mhm,
you basically understand what he's about from the get go. We kind of already talked about the scene where they bring food and have that little
mhm,
back and forth. That actually, there's a sequence here I just kind of want to read to expand
sure.
on some of the world building here. When he's talking about the war between the Naboo and the Gungan from back in the day, so he says the reason for the war was plasma, and the houses that contributed most to the funding of the mercenary army were House Tapalo and House Veruna. When my grandfather learned of this, he challenged Tapalo's father to a duel of honor and eventually succumbed to the injuries Tapalo's blade inflicted. He gestured to the lawn that bordered the veranda. The duel took place just there. Plagueis glanced at the spot. How utterly romantic and human. Kosinga Palpatine's handsome face took on color. So I just want to say the fact that he goes into this big diatribe about the history, why it's such a big deal, something that means so much, clearly means so much to him and his family. And then Plagueis' reaction is like, oh, how utterly romantic and human. Like it's
Just to
it's
basically
just a
shrug.
throwaway thing.
He just verbally
I know,
shrugs
right?
like,
It's
and
so
God.
again, if you wanted just a perfect little encapsulation of just how different like levels these two are on, just like
Well,
take
yeah,
away the force, just like take away the force, like even just like intelligence and like galactic standing, like the fact that Plagueis like is completely unimpressed by what is, you know, an interesting story and one that has such resonance to Kasinga obviously is it's utterly fantastic and
yeah.
it also
He scores no points here. Yeah,
Mm.
like
It's like you
yeah
insult me in my own home, and it's like, well, you kidnapped me here, you know,
yeah.
and also I'm me and
yeah
you're you. How do you think this is going to work? You know, there's
Well, it's
never any
every
right
ounce
interaction,
of
right? Like
yeah.
right
he brings he asks him, he starts talking to him about like this
mm,
poet, you know, do you know the poem? It's like, no, I don't, sadly, no. And he probably does, to be honest. But
right
he's just not going to entertain that, you know.
yeah well
Because
yeah
he's taken the time to learn the language in like the month or so that he's learned about the planet, really. So
right.
he's fluent in the
Establishing that
language.
Naboo has its own language, by the way, which we never really
Yeah.
see. Like in the
No.
films, everyone just
Yeah.
speaks basic, so I don't really
I mean,
understand. I never really understood what they meant by that.
Neither do I, but whatever. Like that's fine. Like maybe it's a traditionalist thing among the, you know, higher society. I don't know, but
Mhm.
it certainly wasn't a thing I ever thought about before this book. But anyway, you know,
Yeah,
so it's like I'm trying to one up you. Like I'll give you a translation of the poem. That's no need. I'm fluent in your language.
Took me a
Okay,
month.
yeah. You know, then there's I prepared food for you. It's like perhaps you'll take up a study of the Mun language next, since you know what we eat. You know, it's like so. You know, you're like we're playing the same game, and I'm just, you know, better at it than you. And then
hmm
there's he starts eating. Plagueis doesn't eat anything, so after a while he has to stop eating. Then it's quiet. He has to speak first. It's like he's losing every power game. It's
And knows it as
it's
well.
just
He's got enough
yeah,
right.
influence and awareness to know that he's losing that
Also,
badly.
yeah.
yeah. Also, he refers to this legend about seven gates that hold back chaos.
Mm,
The fact that he uses chaos instead of hell, again, a little interesting little world building thing there because
Mm.
I think because chaos, like in this context, it's meant to be hell, but he refers to it as chaos, and I think some other cultures, if I remember correctly, in Star Wars, like refer to chaos as well. So it's not a Naboo thing, but then again, there's other ones that also just say hell. So I don't know. It's interesting point with that because if I remember correctly, I think in Tales of the Jedi, isn't I think the people of Onderon, yeah, they also refer to hell as chaos. I don't know if there's some sort of connection with that. I don't know. Do you guys know?
Aside
I'd
from
have to be rereading that. Like, I mean, because
Yeah,
aren't the royals on Onderon descended from Freed and Nad?
yeah,
Like the Sith. So, like, I don't know. Like,
and it's
I'd
aside
have
from the
to
obvious
look that into that.
IRL kind of connections. It's also a logical narrative choice because obviously the Jedi in this era represent order, and the darker side
Right.
tendencies with the peace v war, all that thing.
They're
Chaos
proud
is the
of how
natural
chaotic
fit
they
for
are.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
that's
But
the whole
you know,
thing.
again, seven gates, also a very obvious, seven gates to hold back, hell, 6 layers of hell, depending
Mm.
on, how you interpret that. Again, juxtaposition, saying a lot with a little. I always enjoy it when they go into like the folklore of like certain planets.
Mm.
Even if it's only, to a very limited degree, the fact that it helps this world again just feel more real because yeah, each world
Mhm.
would have their legends, each world would have
Sure.
their poets and all that. So again, all great stuff.
And all at the meta
I
layer, we're aware that this guy is talking about poetry and history of his planet to the literal Lord of the Sith. Like this is just such
Yes.
a laughable notion that he has no way of knowing how out of his
Mhm.
Well, it's also
league
it's
Plagueis
also
is.
like it's just like kind of the irony of like Plagueis for today is taking on the role of the champion of democracy
Mm.
because Kasinga's actively saying the people need to be protected from forces they don't understand, and that's my job. And he says it appears the electorate disagrees with you. It's like only for now. But like I haven't got my hooks
Teeth
in
in
yet.
yet.
I haven't made my manipulations clear. It's like, and so Plagueis is like, okay, he's just kind of. It's almost like that almost went over your head that dig you didn't even really engage with the thought. I'm saying you're a massive hypocrite. It's kind of what he's saying, right? But and then he says, things are going to go my way, starting with the announcement that the deal with Topolo and the banking clan has fallen through, and then that's when Plagueis is like, I wasn't aware that it had, and he's just so unbothered by the whole thing. Like he's already decided to kill this guy. It's just like now I'm going
Mhm.
to do it with purpose because your son would be the perfect apprentice, so I'm going to use you to send him down the dark path.
Mm.
But he was already going to do this. Like like the political game.
Mhm.
It was always okay to run into like an obstacle or two because you can always just like cut off the head there.
Oh
But
yeah.
that's when you get like
Al-
the whole thing about you were talking about with the gates and the impenetrable gates that hold back chaos and the rest of it. But I like that at the end of all that, like
Mhm.
after all the back and forths about the philosophers and the poets and all that, uh Plagueis pretty much confirms what I already said, that he does know the story of Barenko because he said, the defense of Naboo, the poem you mentioned. It's like, what about it? Whatever became of the author, Barenko? He's this a leading question. If he
Mm.
doesn't know
Mhm.
for sure, he can guess that the reason why he doesn't live there anymore and some other family does is because he got whacked. So
Yeah.
it's pretty, it's pretty clear, and that's when he says, "Are you threatening me here in my own home?" It's like
Yeah. And
Vegas
all of it.
Vegas made a placating gesture. Says, "I thought we were discussing history." He was like, "I only meant
Yeah.
to ask what would happen if you were unsuccessful in restraining chaos,
And
and Topolo
and that
wins despite your best efforts." It's just
and
fun. I like it.
and that also leads later on to one of my favorite like mic drop moments where he says, Plagueis turned to him. Your son has great potential. Potential I don't wish to see despoiled by your kind. We're moving him out of your reach in any case. And then he says, I'd been given to believe that the Naboo were an open people, but then the Gungans probably wouldn't agree either.
And that
That
just
is,
somehow sends him over the edge. It's like
yeah.
enough, God. It's
I
it's
think it was
funny that
just too
that's the thing that
many.
breaks it. It's just constantly out of
It was just too
control.
many.
Yeah, like you
But
said,
he's
it's
Too
just
just
many
he's like
losses
going
in a row.
straight for,
yeah,
he's
it's
going
just
straight for the throat with the hypocrisy on that
yeah, it's
one,
a
and
straw
and,
that
and
broke
I
the camel's
absolutely
back.
love it.
He can't deal with
Yeah.
this much of a defeat. And now it's turned to the fact that he's actively bringing up his son. It's like it's not just a threat to him or his power, but a threat to something that he can't really control. Like kind of leaning into that, I don't want the chaos angle. He knows that Plagueis is that close to just completely unseating everything.
Yeah. Also, by the way, I mean, he's talking to Plagueis about a story that he was probably alive for. I mean, he probably didn't know about it. He was probably alive when it happened, which is, I don't know. There's something in that I also find kind of interesting.
And Plagueis
Yeah.
never even reaches for that low hanging fruit. The fact that how old are you again? It's just like, you're like a child.
Yeah.
So,
He doesn't care.
yeah.
I like Plagueis doesn't care after a certain point. Like, we didn't talk about it, but that short scene when he was on Malastare, like figuring out whether Pax team was the one that tried to sabotage the deal on
Oh
Naboo.
yeah.
After in the middle of that, after they start taking digs at him, Pax team's like, "Is this the purpose of your visit?" to reopen wounds that have not yet healed, and Plagueis is like, yes. He just doesn't, that's it. That's all he says.
Yeah, straight to the point.
He does not.
Um,
He has no care. He says it flatly, so he doesn't even take any joy. And it's like, yes, of course. He's like, yes, that's why I'm here. Like let's just wrap
mhm,
this up, and I'm out of here. You
right.
know,
Planting,
that sets up. Yeah, that sets up
comes
what
back
comes
to
in
bite him
the
later
next
on
issue.
with the Maladian thing. Yeah.
Yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Mhm.
The
But
arrogance of
anyway,
the Sith.
that chapter that we're talking about today, Avatar of Mortality, chapter 11. Uh, this is the one in which there, there are like a few key highlights here. One is that Plagueis manipulates Palpatine with a at least at least semi fictional account of like his early life.
I like how it doesn't actually
Although
elaborate on which parts
yeah, we
are
don't
true and
actually
false
know.
as well. I
Yeah,
like that. You get to
Yeah,
kind of pick
yeah.
and choose
correct.
the bits that were fabricated because it
Mhm.
in both references to it not necessarily all being true, you never get a detail on it. So I like that choice.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
which
like.
he doesn't need. He just says, yeah, some portion of it was true, but it's like, okay, that can mean anything.
Hmm.
Which
Yeah.
is fine.
Yeah, it's like I like the way that it's. I feel like I wonder if he's had this one like ready to go just for years and years, or whether he like tailored it to Palpatine
Hmm.
specifically, like on his way here or something. But I mean, he's like, I want to tell you about my past. He began. I was born and raised not on Munilist, but on a world called Magito, and not by my father's primary wife, but to a second wife, what Munes call a codicil partner. So I was a young adult before my father was finally returned to Munilist, and I had my first taste of the planet that gave rise to my species. I've always liked that,
Hmm.
the way he phrased that. It's like it's all that much at least is all true, by the way. Like
Hmm.
Mhm.
that stuff we know to be true, but
You
it's
know
the way
that
he
for a fact.
phrases it. It feels quite, there's like a grandeur to it, and the phrasing of I was a young adult before my father was finally returned to Munilist, and I had my
Mhm.
first taste of the planet that gave rise to my species. It almost feels like,
It's kind of like a
I mean, we've
detached
already had.
pride, right? It's like he's feeling that
Yeah,
sense
Mhm.
of like this has significance, this has importance, but also I ultimately don't really care for the same kind of things as most people. So it's the
yeah,
planet that gave rise to my species, which is it's not like my sacred home or
Mhm.
whatever. It's just
Right.
it's a planet where we came from. He rides
right.
that
It's
line
the cold.
between caring and not at the same time.
Yeah, it's the
And
cold hard logic, and it is true, but at the same time, there's no emotionality in his description
yeah,
beyond the fact that you could infer that obviously it is a big deal, but the way it's written is just like, yeah, this is the cold hard facts. This is how it is, and this is what happened, which you would
yes,
expect too.
yes, and he goes on to explain that it's already established earlier in the book that the Munes don't particularly like multiplying just for the sake of multiplying, because they don't want to share the wealth with other Munes. They want to hoard it all. That's one of their big reasons why they're not driven by the same human compulsion to just proliferate and colonize and go everywhere that they can, just keep on growing. They're the opposite. They don't want that, and so Munilist has strict rules about population growth, and he says, owing to Munilist regulations governing population growth, no Mun of less influence than my father would have been allowed to import a non-indigenous offspring, let alone a half-clan. His father was the head of the IBC at the end. His father was in charge of the bank. So you're talking
Hmm.
about no one gets to do this. Like pretty
Mm.
much almost
Right.
nobody. Um, and even
He's
even if it
basically, I
happened
mean,
before that,
he's in the highest tier of his entire
yeah,
species.
And only
before he
barely
became
got the
the head of it.
exception.
Yeah, his job before becoming the actual head, which he retired from, like he was the head of the IBC for a while and then retired. Before that, he was director of the Treasury branch. So even if that was still his job at the time, you're still talking about like a very, very small group of people that are allowed to do this kind of a
Right.
thing.
Mm.
And
Um,
and the term half clan too.
yes,
The fact he just says that very flatly, it kind of immediately, gives a good impression of the tonality of these sorts of things, and the fact
yes.
that it is such an exception, you could definitely see that as being something like, oh, okay, like
It
that's kind of a taboo. A taboo, I think, is the word I'm looking for.
Mm.
Um,
I mean, clearly they have less they don't mind polygamy so much, but he is effectively like the bastard stepchild or half brother kind of a thing.
right.
But that also means that that's like a step extra. They don't usually allow normal, legitimately born people off world to come back home. That's what they're saying. It's saying if you were born like as immune somewhere else, you're generally not permitted to move here, like ever. Like
Right.
doesn't matter whether you're from
Yeah.
like the main his main partner or not. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just it's very interesting, and that might be an exaggeration to paint himself in a sort of heroic light, like to woe is me, because we don't actually know that
Accepting
that's
this.
true,
Yeah.
but that's what he's saying.
Right.
We know that a lot of this part is true, but that might just be the embellishment of my life was just so unfair, so I took charge, Palpatine, and you can too. You never know where
Mhm.
these lines are drawn, but that's one of the possible areas. And
Mhm.
he says, and yet the members of my father's family regarded me as a trespasser, lacking proper legality and the social aplomb that comes to those born and raised on Munilists. For if there is anything the Munes detest more than wasteful spending, it is nonconformity, and I had it in abundance. And it's true. That's also true in a way that they didn't know more than half of it, because he's by that point in time already a trained force sensitive. He's already at the very least been an apprentice for decade and a half, probably more so than that at that point. So he's got, probably about as much training as Xana had, like by the time that she was done with Bane. So he's definitely got nonconformity. He's weird, like even when they don't know anything about him. And I like the way that he describes them. It's sort of similar to how Palpatine, I think he called his siblings like his fair brothers and sisters, who basically they're goody two shoes, is what he's saying. But
Mhm.
Plagueis says the same thing. He says like they were model citizens, my fair brothers and sisters, or like something similar like that.
The same
He
in a
goes,
similar way to how Palpatine describes his siblings as well.
yeah. I might be misremembering. He might have used a different word than fair, but he said something very similar to that.
He
He said
called
they
well, I
were
know Palpatine calls his well-behaved brothers and
well behaved.
sisters.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, that feels
Yeah.
probably more at home for him anyway. Yeah, so and it's like they were insular, they were self-important, they're identical in their thinking, thrifty to a fault, given to gossip, and it angered me deeply to have been accepted by the galaxy's downtrodden, only to be rejected by this hive of self-serving parochial beings. And it's like, and he doesn't really explain what that means, like to be accepted by like the lesser than, but he's been grubbing it, like with it, like Sith training. This is also true in a way. It's just not necessarily in the way that they believed it to be. It's also not
Mhm.
necessarily what Palpatine's picturing. It's true in a way. So it's interesting how, and this is like not that Palpatine needed to learn this because he's a natural, but like mostly truths are much more useful than outright lies all the time. Like that's what he does most beautifully, is sort of
Mhm.
warp the truth just a little bit, just a little bit. It's just a little bit of a lie, but like what gives it its power is how much truth there is packed into it. um so yeah, it's like it goes on. Much to their displeasure, they were forced to accept that I was a fully bonded. That's a different Plagueis.
I was gonna say it's a very different
Yeah,
Plagueis.
very different Plagueis. Yeah. But I was a fully bonded. It's hard for me not to say because it's
Yeah.
fully. I can do that. Fully bonded is difficult. Fully bonded clan member, entitled to the same share of my father's vast wealth as the rest of them. But as is the case with all members of the elite clans, I had to prove myself worthy of the status of, but by preparing successful financial forecasts and allowing myself to be judged by the ruling elect. I passed my tests and trials, but soon after my father took ill. On his deathbed, I sought his advice concerning my predicament, and he told me that I should do whatever I needed to do, as my very survival was in jeopardy. He said that lesser minds needed guidance and punishment on occasion, and that I shouldn't hesitate to use whatever means necessary to protect my interests, that I owed as much to myself, my species, to life itself. And then he pauses. And that is also hard to say whether that's a lie, because his father was a secret force sensitive. Yes, he had other children, but clearly they didn't inherit his potential. He might have had like you know, the two of us were different from the rest of the family. It's very perfectly done. You can't tell where the lies
Mhm.
start with
And he
this.
is
You just
quite
can't.
literally
And you
spoon-feeding
can the fact
Palpatine
that you can
every
believe
single
it.
detail he needs to kind of unlock his
Yes.
own, restrictions. Like, oh yeah, you're right. This could be me. This
Mhm.
could be me.
Yeah.
Look at this guy. Look at what he is. Look at everything he
Yeah.
has. All the risks he's managed to
Mhm.
sidestep and circumnavigate, and specifically the fact that you're at danger. He's basically putting that. I mean, he's already
Yes.
aware of the risk, but he's literally saying to Palpatine, like, you are threatened. He's going to try and do
Mhm.
something to you. This is like, it's self-defense almost. You've got that justification,
Mhm.
even though you don't need it. You've got that on top of everything else. It's perfectly calibrated to kind of to give Palpatine that kind of push he needs to
It's
step into his first level of
yeah.
Sithdom.
It's very much like Puppet Master, like with the strings, behind the sort of thing going. You just see Plagueis' hand, just like, okay, I'm just gonna just a little, and then these actions come from it, and yeah,
Well, it's the kind of
very
thing as well
very well written.
that would work even without the aspect of him being a Sith. Like you could see him giving the
Yes.
same speeches
Yes.
just as a pawn for the political game. Even if it turned out he wasn't
Yeah.
force sensitive, like it works perfectly.
That's what
just
Palpatine
on
thinks
that
it
level.
is. Yes.
Yeah.
It would have had the same effect essentially. It's
Yeah.
almost it's not so much an afterthought, but it is very much like you could see this working even in the universe where he didn't have the Force, like you were saying. This is kind of where we kind of get the not the full revelation that he has the Force for himself, but also the first time Plagueis really senses it in him. And he even says when he has this reaction when he's angry, and he says, Palpatine's fury buffeted Plagueis. Blossoms growing along the sides of the pathway folded in on themselves, and their pollinators began to buzz in agitation. 4D reacted as well, wobbling on its feet, as if in the grip of a powerful electromagnet. Had this human truly been born of flesh and blood parents? Plagueis asked himself, when, in fact, he seemed sprung from nature itself. Was the Force so strong in him that it had concealed itself? So that's kind of the point where I love the descriptors of like the environment around him changing, the plants folding in on themselves, 114D kind of reacting, and also the kind of revelation in Plagueis' thought process when he sort of senses like this boy is something far beyond anything I had ever anticipated. And he said sprung from nature itself, I think is really interesting because it further highlights what you were saying before, Matt, about Palpatine being so far removed from the rest of his family, and obviously and we'll get more into that shortly. It's a great way of like teeing that up, and the sort of astonishment on Plagueis in Plagueis's like thought process, like him being so beyond any of the other Darksiders he had ever sensed before. The fact that he's actually reacting to this. And you could just imagine like the plants like crumpling in on themselves, 114D like shaking as if he is kind of like electrified. That sort of, and all of this is just because Palpatine got mad. So it's pretty intense. And I think the descriptors in that is excellent. And again, it goes back to the Force being so strong in him that it had basically, concealed itself just subconsciously. And his revelation in that is like the final push that Plagueis needs to finally, get that story going. And again, I just love the way that that's written.
Yeah. That's the thing. It also ties in with what we were just talking about a moment ago, is that he does kind of believe in fate because he's always believed that the dark side will provide the perfect, cohort. And like, this is a sign of that. Is basically, I mean, he knows who Yoda is. I don't know that he's met Yoda, but certainly Plagueis knows who Yoda is. He's like, this is a dark Yoda. Like, these are hard to find. Like, you know what I mean? It's like we've been waiting 1,000 years for this, Yeah. So yeah, it's really, I mean, you can make the argument that Plagueis is right alongside him there, but I mean the point is he's alone. He's alone in the galaxy. Like he needs a partner of equal strength, So it's very, very good stuff. Did you want to actually talk about the murder of
I mean, it's brutal for one thing. I mean,
yeah.
the Force like exploding out of him essentially. The dialogue between Kasinga and his son at the end there. I mean, we literally get confirmation of a lot of things I think we could already guess up until this point. The fact that Kasinga hated him for his intelligence, was jealous of his capabilities. The fact that Kasinga
Apparently from when
tried
he
to
was an
actually
infant.
Yeah, I was gonna say he was
yeah,
holding
tried
him in
to
his
swaddle him at one
hands as
point.
a
Yeah.
baby in his arms, and even then he's like, "Oh, this guy's this
Yeah.
guy's
And
really
he
not
says
right."
like he fought him back with a strength too powerful for his size and his age. I mean, like that is, I mean, just that puts some very uncomfortable images in your head. But it just goes to show, like, man, Palpatine, you never had a chance, did you?
He really didn't. He really didn't. He was born
No.
of the dark side, practically. Just a fun little fact. I
Yeah.
had forgotten that this took place on a ship. When I was looking back in my head at the memories of this kind of sequence, it was always in their little lake house home with like the balconies and the lake and everything. I don't know why I'd had that memory. I must have just blanked it. But yeah, it was like, oh, this was on the ship on the way back to the planet. When this takes place, because it gives you that kind of just the idea of the bulkheads and the metal being caved in, like that sheer kind of brutality and the strength and the force. You can get that across a bit more when it's in the kind of like that steel environment of the ship.
Yeah. Oh, and
yeah, it was a good choice, and also it's very cover upable as well. Like you can just they can just discreetly hide away that corpse vessel.
Yeah, and Kasinga literally calls him an animal at heart, but like instead of recoiling, Palpatine just says, "Yeah, I'm king of the beasts," and like that's again, it's very much that blunt kind of Plagueis like way of speaking. And I mean, imagine your son saying that to you. I mean, like regardless of whose perspective you're coming from, it's pretty intense. Yeah, and basically he sets them off because he tries to separate him, and then Kasinga tries to essentially kill Palpatine, takes a step towards him, and that's when his Force abilities finally manifest fully, and he goes full serial killer at this point. I do appreciate the fact that we don't actually see the entire thing play out. We see the beginning, we see the aftermath, but everything else is kind of left up to the imagination.
It was another not just the men, but the women and children too moment, because he does kill everyone on that ship, his entire family.
Well, he does he does say what he did in like not necessarily gory fine detail, but he says exactly what he did later when Plagueis kind of
he describes
sort of part of his training. Yeah, but it's even after that. It's part of the Sith training. He forces him to keep telling this story, like until he becomes less guilty about it and able to draw upon the dark side more fully. So we'll get to that in not this chapter, but it'll come up. But I like that when this happens, there's like a what do you call it? Like a disturbance in the force. I was trying to think, what do they call it? It just wasn't coming to me. There's a disturbance in the force, and at that moment, he and 114D are inflicting horrible damage on Venomous, trying to do one of their resurrection spells, and in order to do that, they had to like horribly mutilate his internal organs and all kinds of just crazy Frankenstein stuff. And in the middle, like, so while this is happening, Plagueis is in deep meditation mode, trying to make something happen so he can resurrect Venomous. And this, what's gone on with Palpatine is such a strong disturbance in the Force that he sits up thinking, Venomous? Like he actually thinks he's brought him back from the dead, in that moment before realizing, no, I'm just getting a phone call about Palpatine. It's like, oh, okay, something interesting must have happened far away. Let's look into that.
114D's response as well is like, whoa, you're right. He's reacting to that reaction as well.
I mean, the fact that that's his first instinct, it makes sense given like what they're doing in the setting that they're in, and his obsession with wanting this process to actually work. So the fact that he would interpret something so unexpected as that from the get-go makes a lot of sense.
All right. So anyway, Plagueis says, "Okay, I'll be there soon." And then he makes him wait like a week or two, before he shows up.
A week isn't soon. It's like, what do I owe you, kid?
Yeah.
I'm not your dad.
I'm gonna break an appointment over this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Shit to do.
What have you got for me? And he's like, I've been spying for you. It's like, you've been giving me basically nothing. If you want us to have a kind of the relationship you want, and you have to be something here. And he's kind of showing. He's
forcing him to take that initiative.
Yeah, he's pulling back on the spoon feeding that he was doing earlier, and I said, okay, show me some of your.
To be fair, he's being a dick because sure. He told him this whole story, to tempt him into action. He's like, "You're my secret man. I want you to work for me." And now it's like, and Palpatine says, "Forgive me for having allowed myself to believe that we were in this together." Is it together? Well, how so? it's literally like
no, for sure, you're right. He is being absolute dick there, but I love the fact that it's leaning into not just what he's going to be trying to kind of instill in Palpatine as a Sith, but also that, hey, Palpatine, all that thing you were spouting a week ago and saying what you believed in, what you valued. This is what it means. Ride or die. Are you going to show me what you've got here? And then he does kind of rise to that, and you see some of the anger, but also some of the supplication. He kind of leans in and recognizes the fact that, okay, this guy, this is a figure of actual power, and I can't just steamroll my way through these situations the way I have been. Particularly because I've already been navigated into a position of supplication already. Now, I've proven to him. I'm demonstrating right now in this scene. He is the master. I'm the apprentice. He then defaults back into that kind of natural state of being that inherent politician, and starts, schmoozing, and pretty much immediately he falls straight back into that role once he's calmed down a bit. It's all very cleverly done, because this is basically the bookend to what's been set up in the previous chapters. This is in terms of an introduction to Palpatine as a character. You don't need to know anything about him for the future of Star Wars. You could read this book and it'd be your first impression of him somehow. It'd be a very strange experience to have read this and not know anything about Palpatine beforehand. But you could do that, sign of a good writing, and it would still work. He's not relying on anything else here.
It almost comes off as like a dark side version of Luke and Ben on Falcon, and get the whole like you've taken your first step into a larger world sort of dynamic, in the sense of like you were saying, Cal, like this is what it means to be Sith. If you want to progress on this path, this is what you're going to have to do, and we get the ultimate transformation, the birth of Darth Sidious, essentially. The reveal of the Sith. I do like the fact that Palpatine is like, if I had wanted that, I would have made my parents, surrender me to the Jedi. And Plagueis just laughs that off, as if like, what
would
possible
they
good
have for you? I love the line there. What could possibly I have to do with you then? It's brilliant. And it's just not just the dismissal, but the sheer like, oh, you know so little. Like, I've got so much to teach you. It's reaffirmation of that I'm the master here. Mentality. Everything he's doing here is showing you don't have the power you thought you did, but you will if you stick with me. I can show you what
because
you can accomplish.
Yeah, because he tries to summon his powers at Plagueis, and Plagueis is just like, careful, boy. And he lets a little of his true nature out, and like Sidious is like, Palpatine at this point is like instantly like, oh, whoa, and then of course I like how the book notes like Plagueis was feeling haughty, so he adds on, what you sense is just a fraction of what I can bring. It's like, okay, you have to really grind it in at this point, like who's in charge. But in this instance, fine. Yeah,
but also,
that's par for the course with Sith Masters, so it's okay.
And also, it's like, hey, do you want to be a Sith? It's like, yeah, sure, I'll be a Sith. It's basically, there's no like lead into what being a Sith is, or what it means, or the significance of the culture, or the transformation of the life, or anything like that. He basically just says, hey, do you want to be the Dark Lord of the Sith with me? And Palpatine's like, yeah, sure, why not? Because all of the elements of coercion and manipulation and enticement that would usually apply to being a Sith, he's already laid the groundwork for that with Palpatine outside of the being a Force user, which is so perfect for both characters. The trappings of the creed and the Force and everything that would get someone like Bane going, Palpatine ultimately doesn't really care about that. It naturally falls into place based on what he already believes, but it's not like he's living up to this ideal in his own head. To him, I'm a natural fit for the Sith because everything I believe happens to be in place with this, and it's the source of the power. It's the dark side. That's all he really cares about. He's not got this kind of monastic kind of understanding or care for what the kind of, like I said, the kind of thing that Bane would care about. All of the kind of creed.
He's advising him against that, actually.
Yeah.
Because I disagree with you a little bit, saying that there's no context for it, because he gives him just enough. You know what I mean? It's like, because Palpatine was like, when he first says, when he first mentions the Sith, he tees it up by saying, oh, this power, I'm not quite sure what to make of it, because he hasn't come out and said he's got the power himself as well. And he says he also resists the urge to grab him on the shoulder or whatever, because he doesn't want to be too familiar. He's still trying to distance himself and kind of make it seem like he's not quite ready to reveal himself yet, like not quite yet. We're 1 minute away from that. So he says, instead he paced away from him. He said, you could devote the rest of your life trying to make sense of this power, this gift, he said without looking back. Or you could consider a different option. And he swung to face him. So it's all theatricality. It's all like making the choices to do it all when he does it. And it's like a nice line. He says, it's a dark path into a trackless wilderness from which few return, not without a guide, at any rate. And this is the best line. He says, but it is also the shortest, quickest route between today and tomorrow. So it's like the quick and easy path. Like put that way, somebody with Palpatine's mind, like, I think you can infer quite a lot without the history lesson, because that's when he says, in your studies, have you ever learned of the Sith? And it said he's asked the question more carefully than I just did. Have you ever learned of the Sith? Kind of a thing. He's asking the question carefully. And Palpatine blinks, and he's like, a Jedi sect, weren't they? Like the result of a kind of family feud. It's like, yes, in some ways, just that. But more the Sith are the prodigal offspring, like destined to return and overthrow the Jedi. So I think those all combined is enough. Plus, like Palpatine's
It's
already
all
seen what
leaning
he
into the
himself can do.
political and power base aspects of the equation. No, it's not leading into the mystical or the Force or the physical
say that.
power or anything like that. No, I know, but that's what I like about it. It's the fact that it's tying into the parts of the equation that most appeal to Palpatine himself, and also to a certain
tailored for
extent
Palpatine,
Plagueis. Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right.
It's
He's trying.
I
Yeah.
really like the fact that it does that. It's it's just compared
Mm-hmm.
to other Sith kind of enticements. It's very much it's intentionally short on the rest of it. You know, it doesn't need that extra
Mm-hmm.
aplomb or whatever. It's just purely okay. This is what I
Yeah.
need to tip this man over the edge, and to
Yeah.
step
Well,
into Plagueis'
I
role.
think it works.
The rest can come
Yeah.
later anyway.
But yeah. And I think it really works too because Palpatine's already so Sith-like in his disposition that, especially after this point, you know, like his fall's already like happened at this point. This is just kind of the final little like, you know, bow on top to finally get him fully committed to the Sith teachings, and I think it works.
The
In
other
that,
thing-
and of course we get the anointment of the name, you know, Sidious. You know, he even refers to, you know, Palpatine as being an insidious person. So we get almost the exact same, you know, dialogue that he would later give to Anakin when he's giving him the name of Vader. You know, from here on, the truth of you will be Sidious. So that's all really nice, and I like the fact that he uses that same similar let me rephrase, similar sequence of dialogue from the Revenge of the Sith novel to anoint him. It's a nice little continuity there.
And if I'm Insidious, what are you going to be? You're going to be an invader. You'll be Vader, Darth Vader. I love the way it just pulls that out of nowhere as well.
Yeah.
But,
And also, like in
yeah.
I will say this though, during the audiobook sequence, I think they're playing like the actual Sith theme during this, and it's really it's pretty chilling. It's nice.
Yeah, it works really well. The whole
Okay.
audiobook is great. But I also like the fact, like, just to add a little bit to what you were saying earlier, they made it pretty clear throughout when he was getting to know Palpatine that Palpatine's life had no like obvious trajectory anyway before he killed his family and wound up as like a candidate for like, you know, being guilty of murder and, you know, all the rest of it. So it's like the Sith is kind of all he could have really done at this point, you know, without going just to go live in a swamp somewhere like in exile, like so many people do. I mean, he'd be the obvious. What Plagueis is saying is like, without me, this is about as far as you're ever going to get. This right here, you feel lost in life and this limited understanding of you have of your potential. That's all you'll ever get. And he already knows he's won this because he's tasted it. He's tasted that power, and because he has the personality that he has. So this whole thing is all just about phrasing it and framing it just the correct way to get Palpatine to become Sidious. Basically, Palpatine was never a good person. It's less a fall and more just
exactly. It takes such a
leading
little
you down
push.
the right.
It's just go, hey, do you want it?
Completion of the
You got
process.
it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
and then I really like
There you
it.
go.
I like this chapter end too because it's a really nice way to put it, and it's almost true. And going along with what Kellen always says, it's just not on. This is not the way shit works. It's like you can start off with this mentality, but this is never, ever gonna fly. It says, you know, when Palpatine stood, Plagueis took him by the shoulders. In time, you will come to understand that you are one with the dark side of the Force, and that your power is beyond contradiction. But just now, and until I tell you differently, abiding submission is your only road to salvation. When is that point, and how will I know? Like there's no one's ever going to accept that, and no one ever does, and that's it doesn't work. It just doesn't.
And
work.
Plagueis in particular, we know he thinks that the status quo can be
Yeah.
fine, or we can be partners, right? He doesn't outline that here. He doesn't outline that at any point. He's just, we're going to do exactly what every other Sith has done, except in my head, it's going to change at the last minute.
Yeah, the weird thing is he's sincere,
music, you know?
but how is anyone ever to know that?
Exactly.
You're
Yeah,
sincere?
he's not fostering that. That new relationship. I mean, apart from anything else, he tells Sidious how it's worked in the past. Like he could have just omitted all of that. You know, he didn't have to tell him anything about the Rule of Two if he wanted to change it. You know,
Yeah, reading books though, he'd find out.
Oh no, for sure. No,
Yeah,
I'm not saying he
with
should
all
have
his
obscured
research
it,
and
but just
holocrons, there's no way that would get past.
but just he could. I don't even mean lying about it, but just framing it like this is how it used to be done. We're not doing that anymore because this and this. You know, we don't need to. Or it never would have worked regardless because the nature of the Sith was people. But just the attempt wasn't even there. It's just like you say, he keeps it in his head and never tells anybody.
It's not the nature of the dark side. It is
not
capable of working.
It's
that
self-defeating.
way.
Evil is always
nature.
self-defeating.
Yeah.
Is the
Exactly. Which is why that, it's the tragedy of Darth Plagueis at the end of the day anyway.
Hmm.
Yeah, so this episode was really mostly about like the seduction, for want of a better word, of it isn't the introduction of Palpatine into the Sith Order. We'll talk about the training and everything later on. A lot of that is because there's a couple of time skips that happen in a fairly short succession throughout the book, and it takes we'll kind of begin right off the heels of this, and then we'll jump like, I don't know, like 11, 12 years, whatever it is, and then we'll do a lot of political maneuvering, and then there's another time gap, so it's kind of like some of that stuff I think is more interesting to talk about in a cluster together. So we'll see how we choose to break those up. So today this was just getting the ball rolling with the initial steps of Palpatine into the Sith Order, and also the beginning of the rise of Naboo, because that's interesting. So yeah,
Kind of shared
Anyway.
trajectories there for the first little bit, aren't they?
So,
Shared stars.
yep.
But yeah, this
A
has
lot
been
of
our
heavy lifting
analysis
for
of.
Phantom Menace works.
Yeah, exactly. But this has been our Fanalysis Plagueis. Hope you guys have enjoyed. I'm Callan, and I still don't have an outro.
This is Matt. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.
Evanova 95, we hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.